It begins in 1861. I have just inherited the throne of the Netherlands. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 876 America promotes strategic autonomy. While Republican presidential candidate James Garfield and Vice Presidential candidate Chester and their candidate for Secretary of State Brian, former Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, were discussing blocking the re-election of the ruling Democratic President Stephen Douglas at the Republican campaign headquarters in Washington, Stephen Douglas was meeting with important members of his team in the White House. Alan Thurman, Democratic Party, became the Speaker of the Senate after his successful election in 1879. Samuel Jackson, a Democrat, he has been re-elected as Speaker of the House of Representatives once since 1876, but he is an important ally of Stephen Douglas in American politics. Thomas Allen, the Secretary of State appointed by the Stephen Douglas government after it came to power in 1876. Together with the current owner of the White House, Stephen Douglas. The four major giants of the Democratic Party in American politics are all gathered here. Thomas Allen is a British citizen. His position leaned towards Britain. He said, "The relationship between the Netherlands and Britain is very bad at present. The relationship between the United States and the Netherlands in the past few years was well known in the world, but in the end, the Netherlands has always been in our corner. Please look at the data in your hands. From 1860 to last year's 1880, there were 5 million European and Latin American immigrants to the northern United States." Thomas Allen was always startled, so Alan Thurman and Samuel Jackson looked at each other calmly. At the same time, Stephen Douglas's livid face also let the two know that Thomas's next words would not be very pleasing. "Sure enough, Thomas, we have 5 million new immigrants in 10 years, which is definitely a big deal for our labor force, but when we know some other things, we are really not happy." Why? Because when we were looking for immigrants in Gruppo, the Netherlands was actually competing with us in Europe, and even the Netherlands stretched its claws to America. Did you know that Edison, the most famous inventor of the Netherlands who invented electric lights and telegraphs, immigrated from America to the Dutch-Australian continent in 1864? After that, the road of invention in the Netherlands was like 100 flowers blooming, and it soared into the sky under the detonation of Edison. Let me tell you, this is just one of the more obvious cases. The Netherlands is plundering our talents and hollowing out our industrial base. At the same time, the industrial products invented by our trained talents in turn earn our dollars. In the end, the Netherlands became a country above the United States. I suggest that in the next policy, we should go beyond the influence of the Netherlands and accept other countries as new partners of the United States, and even. Thomas Allen stared at them and said, "We can even ally with other powers to fight against the presence of the Netherlands in America." Senate President Alan Thurman showed a look of shock on his face. He couldn't help but exclaimed, "Isn't the Secretary of State afraid that the incident of Dutch capital fleeing America some time ago will happen again?" Hearing this, House Speaker Samuel Jackson also nodded and said, "If the employment rate caused by Dutch capital cannot be compensated and the panic caused by the people cannot be stopped, I don't agree to increase the diplomatic actions against the Dutch royal palace again." Before he finished, he reminded me, "The large-scale attempt of Dutch capital to withdraw from America some time ago shocked many people. Even many friends in our constituency in New York called me and advised me not to support it, because many people in New York have expressed doubts about the ruling ability of our Democratic Party. So, Mr. President and Secretary of State, you need to think twice before you act. After all, there are millions of employees under the Dutch capital. If something goes wrong, it will be difficult to deal with it." This is exactly what Stephen Douglas is worried about. After visiting Berlin some time ago, he was almost pushed by Bismarck to fall out with the Netherlands. The United States of America united with the German Empire? Although it failed in the end, it also exposed the contradiction between itself and the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Although the Kingdom of the Netherlands did not pursue it in the end, and even supported the restoration of relations between the two countries. But Stephen naturally understood that the case of broken mirrors is very profound. Therefore, he has been much more low-key in this regard. However, secretly, he still reused Thomas Allen, because this guy has a close relationship with Britain, and at the same time, He has frequent interactions with many German parliamentarians and officials, which is for the Netherlands to see. Stephen Douglas: even so, we still need to keep a certain distance from the Netherlands. After all, no matter how fierce the competition between the Netherlands and Britain is, it is closely related to our comfort, and at the same time, it is also our opportunity. It is not impossible for Germany and the United States to take the opportunity to rise and replace Britain and the Netherlands in industry. This is why Stephen persuaded those people in the government to support the main theme of his foreign policy of no longer being close to the Netherlands. He still supports Thomas's approach, codenamed Operation Detachment from the Netherlands. Alan Thurman and Samuel Jackson heard this and immediately understood that President Stephen had already figured it out. They sighed in their hearts, and then remained silent, using silence instead of approval to support the Democratic Party's alienation action against the Netherlands. On March 20, 1881, American President Stephen Douglas said at a Democratic Party campaign rally in Chicago, "I have always supported America's isolated and independent foreign policy. President Monroe has always been my idol, so I support foreign policy and will continue the practice of Americans managing American territories and Europeans not being able to interfere in American politics. I think that not only South America but also North America should be treated equally. I call on other forces and countries currently in America to restore their political power and military power in their locations, and not to colonize in America. America has the right to support America's power and responsibility for diplomatic autonomy." The words of Stephen Douglas, the President of the United States, caused an uproar in Europe and the world. Although he was only delivering a foreign policy speech at a rally for his re-election campaign in his own country, the Republican Party took the opportunity to strongly criticize his foreign policy, even his internationalization, and his approach of forcing the inside with the outside. Suddenly, Stephen Douglas became the target of criticism from many European countries. Even in the Netherlands, many people expressed their disappointment with Stephen Douglas, because it was obvious that this was aimed at the Netherlands. Many people speculated that if the Democratic Party continued to govern, there would be a high probability that the relationship between the Netherlands and the United States would continue to deteriorate. Chapter 877: Bismarck visits Buckingham Palace and achieves his goal. 1881, Bismarck of the German Empire visited London, England. This was the first time Bismarck had set foot on the land of the British Isles, again after attending the funeral of former British Prime Minister Palmerston in 1867. He first sent a personal letter to Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom on behalf of German Emperor William I. After that, he was given a grand reception by Queen Victoria at Buckingham Palace. Finally, Queen Victoria, who was born in Germany and naturally knew German, held a two-person meeting with Bismarck that was speculated and watched. In the future history, this meeting was recorded in the history books and became one of the most important bilateral meetings in the European pattern and the century pattern in the late 19th century. Because its influence is so far-reaching that it is enough to change the world pattern. And now the two are having a hot conversation about the region under the attention of the outside world. Queen Victoria said, "Stephen Douglas promoted America's strategic autonomy, and the vassal theory reflected dissatisfaction with Melbourne." On March 20, 1881, Democratic President Stephen Douglas delivered a speech on America's foreign policy at a rally in Chicago for his re-election campaign. He hinted at his dissatisfaction with the Netherlands' interference in America and the Americas, which attracted the attention of the whole world. She continued, Stephen Douglas talked about the increasing tensions between Britain and the Netherlands, which led to the theory of America and America being vassalized by the Netherlands. It brought out two messages. One is that America needs to achieve strategic autonomy, whether it is industrial technology, energy, arms or economic industries. It will take time and effort. If Britain and the Netherlands become more tense because of issues such as the sovereignty of the Strait of Malacca, in addition to hindering America from focusing on strengthening its strength and autonomy, the Netherlands may also increase its influence in the Americas, and finally force Latin America to stand completely on the side of the Netherlands against Britain, so that Latin America, which is already heavily dependent on the Netherlands, and even the United States of America, which is part of the Americas, will have to rely more on the Netherlands in all aspects, and the entire America will have to rely on the Kingdom of the Netherlands' foreign military and political diplomacy policies. The second message was definitely obscure, that is, Stephen Douglas had doubts about the Netherlands' intentions. The intensified tension between Britain and the Netherlands has damaged the strategic autonomy of the Netherlands' allies, such as the United States and the Americas. On the surface, It was an objective analysis, but he also hinted that the Netherlands was weak and deliberately escalating its confrontation with Britain, and it could also suffer the consequences of firmly controlling Latin America and even the United States of America. The vassal theory reflects this doubt. Bismarck's eyes were shining, and he nodded to Queen Victoria's words, and then said, "Your Majesty, Stephen Douglas is just putting the interests of America first." Before the 18th century, Her Majesty's British Empire established 13 British North American colonies along the Atlantic coast of the United States. In 1775, the American People's War of Independence against your country's colonial rule broke out. On July 4, 1776, the Second Continental Conference was held in Philadelphia, USA. George Washington was the commander-in-chief of the continent. He issued the Declaration of Independence and announced the formal establishment of the United States of America at that time. In 1783, the Constitution of the United States was passed to establish a federal state. A dissatisfied sounded. Obviously it was made by Queen Victoria. Bismarck didn't need to look to guess that Queen Victoria, who was now sitting opposite him, would not look good, but he didn't care. He just said, "American diplomacy tends to be political realism rather than ideology." In order to get rid of the constraints of Britain on the United States after independence, Monroe, the 5th, 8th and 9th President of the United States, actively developed relations with the powerful French Empire in Europe during his term from 1817 to 1825. At the same time, he increased strategic relations with the Russian Empire, which was at odds with Britain. All these made the United States the closest ally of France and Russia in the Americas. Bismarck's truth once again attacked Queen Victoria with malicious words. Although the latter was dissatisfied, now was an extraordinary period, and she could only listen quietly to the other party's verbal and historical attacks. In 1830, Britain and the Netherlands had a big quarrel over Belgium. Britain supported Belgium to separate from the United Kingdom of the Netherlands, Belgium and Luxembourg to become a new kingdom, which led to the full-scale hostility between Britain and the Netherlands. America took the opportunity to win over the Netherlands, and finally got its reward in the American situation. Dutch capital gradually entered the United States, and the American economy took off rapidly. At the same time, hundreds of thousands of highly skilled Dutch capitalists poured into the United States, and the Netherlands became the new darling of the American upper class. The Netherlands and the United States have since laid the foundation for an alliance, and this is exactly the topic we need to discuss today. Bismarck paused, then smiled slightly and said, "In 1778, American Benjamin Franklin successfully persuaded the Bourbon dynasty, so that the French Empire and the United States signed a military alliance treaty. The French Empire formally recognized the United States' independence from Britain. France, Spain and the Netherlands successively joined the war, and the front against Britain was established. The template for the Netherlands to fight against Britain now is not the practice of the United States joining the French Empire and other countries to fight against Britain. The German Empire cannot afford to offend our neighbors. After all, we are not Britain, looking at the natural sea barriers of the English Channel and the North Sea to resist the European land." Bismarck's meaning is very clear. Britain now needs to win over the German Empire. If the German Empire helps Britain, it will have to face the consequences of being besieged by the Dutch allies. The German Empire will not be able to stand alone against other countries like Britain by relying on the sea. The German Empire needs to pay more energy to deal with the retaliation of the Netherlands. In short, Britain needs to spend a lot of money to win over our German Empire. Although Queen Victoria hated the other party, she had to admit that the German Empire was the one that Britain needed to win over the most. If they couldn't win it over, at least they shouldn't push it to the Netherlands. However, Bismarck was able to come immediately after being invited this time, which showed that the German Empire was willing to accept the deal and didn't want to see the Netherlands become too powerful. This was already obvious. Her Majesty, who knew the situation well, was certain in her heart and said, "Now Stephen Douglas's theory of American strategic autonomy, as you said, is based on the predecessor Monroe and has been developed. But for the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Stephen Douglas's proposition is essentially to push Latin America out of the Netherlands' sphere of influence, especially the West. This will affect the Kingdom of the Netherlands' ruling position there. I think this is an opportunity for Britain and Germany. Of course, I think it's time for the German Empire to replace part of the Netherlands' influence there. Britain supports this." Bismarck smiled when he heard this. Apparently, he had achieved his goal. Chapter 878, Germany's aims at Latin America? Queen Victoria saw Bismarck's intention, so she calmed down and said calmly, Britain supports the German Empire to replace the Netherlands' power in Latin America. Bismarck's goal was achieved, but he hesitated and said, but these countries have a strong alliance with the Netherlands. Britain's face may not be very useful there. Seeing the displeasure on Queen Victoria's face, Bismarck said, now U.S. President Stephen Douglas's theory of strategic autonomy of the United States and even the Americas is based on the foreign policy of his predecessor President Monroe. It is just being developed now, but from the United States' own position, Stephen Douglas's proposition is actually promoting a multipolar world order. Bismarck showed a cunning smile and looked at Queen Victoria and said, you must know that this multipolarization is actually weakening the global hegemony of the British Empire and the two-power competition with Britain after the rise of the Netherlands. Hearing this, Queen Victoria fell silent. Queen Victoria said calmly, if the German Empire wants to further advance its position, I think it is fundamental to take what belongs to it. Britain will not teach the German Empire how to expand its territory in Latin America, but our will to support the German Empire in doing so remains unchanged. Melbourne Net of the Royal Palace of the Netherlands. King William IV of the Netherlands frowned as he looked at the recent lofty ambitions of President Stephen Douglas of the United States. Next to him were his core think tank team, members of the Dutch William IV Security Committee. Cantor, director of the Dutch National Security Council and coordinator of Atlantic Affairs, and the other three were Acchi, coordinator of the Indian Ocean and Pacific, Samuel, coordinator of Europe and Africa, Felix, coordinator of the Americas, and Herman van Perron, a famous special current affairs commentator of the European Times and president of the University of Sydney. William IV said, at a presidential campaign rally in Chicago, the President of the United States, Stephen Douglas, directly announced his diplomatic views if he was re-elected as president, expounding on the United States and the strategic autonomy of the Americas. This caused a lot of discussion in the United States and even in Latin America, and was even labeled as opposing the Netherlands in currying favor with Britain and damaging the unity of the Dutch and American alliance. The remarks of the President of the United States, Stephen Douglas, also caused a huge political tsunami in Europe and the world. What does this action of the President of the United States mean to the Netherlands? Herman van Perron said, in terms of political system and ideology, if you really want to count, the United States of America belongs to the leader of the presidential system camp in America, which is different from the constitutional monarchy of Europe. But in recent years, after the three-party election in the Netherlands, the Dutch system is the closest to the United States in the West. So seriously speaking, the United States of America belongs to the Dutch camp in the struggle between the Netherlands and Britain, but as long as you look at the foreign policy of Stephen Douglas after he came to power recently, and know the foreign policy of Monroe, the fourth President of the United States, and have a certain understanding of Stephen, who claims to be the second President Monroe, you can know that under the Monroe Doctrine diplomacy, independence has always been the diplomatic policy advocated by successive presidents of the United States. The strategic autonomy that Stephen Douglas talked about is just a formal inheritance from his predecessors and a development. I think President Stephen of the United States is telling diplomacy that the United States needs a position of its own. Yes, a position of great power status. William IV said dissatisfiedly, but in this case, it should be considered by the outside world as a great trouble to the Netherlands. As the second in command here, Cantor, director of the Netherlands National Security Council and coordinator of Atlantic Affairs, said, this has indeed disrupted our original layout of the Netherlands. The real problem is that I originally wanted the Netherlands to attempt to bind the Netherlands allies with ideology and allies, and to maintain the Netherlands' global strategic interests in the name of the ally zone on the east and west coasts of the Pacific Ocean. Sometimes, these allies even have to pay for the Netherlands' global interests on their behalf. Stephen Douglas mentioned it well. The relationship between Britain and the Netherlands has become more tense. America will have more time and resources to promote strategic autonomy, but if it continues to follow Dutch diplomacy, it may become a strategic vassal of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. On the one hand, the relevant statement has relieved America's own worries, because this has hindered America's dream of becoming a great power to a certain extent. On the other hand, it also makes people pay attention to what the Netherlands intends to do next. William IV, you mean, in this way, all countries have begun to observe the reaction of the Netherlands before taking the next step? Cantor nodded and said, Your Majesty, the Kingdom of the Netherlands has risen so fast in recent years, So fast that many countries cannot react. As far as the author knows, a large number of readers do not believe it either, which has caused a lack of information and strength. So when they see us fighting with the world's largest country, Britain, all countries are using Britain as a touchstone to measure our strength. However, Britain has not actually confronted us yet, but America has taken the lead in playing diplomatic strategic autonomy with us. It really thinks that the Netherlands has no time to take care of other things. Cantor said angrily, whether it was the Crimean Wars led by Britain and France and the Tsarist Russian Empire, or the struggle for territory among forces in the Balkan Peninsula, they would affect the situation in Europe and then the world. However, the development of the world has a global impact, which does not mean that every country must choose sides. The experience of the outcome of the American Civil War, when countries chose sides, showed that Sun and Zhang would only intensify the confrontation and even trigger a large-scale war. It was either black or white. What we need to pay attention to is that it is a common practice of British diplomacy. Be careful that Britain will use these events to diplomatically besiege the Netherlands behind the scenes. William IV, you are worried that Britain will instigate other major powers to take action against the Netherlands. Cantor nodded and said, that's for sure. If we didn't do this and wait for death, the British Empire, which is still known as the world's largest country, would not be. I don't think Queen Victoria would sit back and do nothing. William IV asked, why is it Queen Victoria, not Prime Minister Gladstone? Cantor, since the United States of America gained independence from Britain in 1776, Britain has adopted a foreign policy of either friend or foe. France, Spain and the Netherlands became accomplices of the independence of the United States of America. It is precisely because of this that I think Queen Victoria will not make the same mistakes as her predecessors, but will learn from them. Gladstone, the British Prime Minister, can come forward, but the gap in status shows Britain's attitude. Therefore, Queen Victoria's coming forward shows Britain's highest diplomatic camp and proves Britain's importance. William IV, so it was she who hosted the invitation to German Chancellor Bismarck to visit London. Cantor said affirmatively, it must be. Chapter 879, The Utilization Value of the Greek Royal Scandal. Since the dispute between Britain and the Netherlands over the sovereignty of the Strait of Malacca in 1876, Britain has strengthened its defenses on the Malay Peninsula side north of the Strait of Malacca, while the Netherlands has heavily guarded the Sumatra Island south of the strait. Both sides attach great importance to that place. If we are not careful, it is very likely to trigger a war. Bismarck's temporary post house in the German Empire Embassy in the British Empire. Bismarck said to his staff, there are only 2 of them in this room. If you know him, you must be surprised that this person is the only 3rd-generation male of the German Empire royal family, Crown Prince William. He was born in 1859 and is now 22 years old. This time he followed his teacher Bismarck to visit London. Of course, he was also warmly received by his grandmother Queen Victoria. After all, his mother, Princess Victoria, is the Queen's favorite eldest daughter. Your Excellency the Prime Minister, Britain and the Netherlands are now engaging in a large-scale diplomatic struggle around the world. This is a great opportunity for our German Empire. I don't quite understand why Your Excellency the Prime Minister would choose to continue hiding behind the scenes instead of stepping forward to wrestle with the Netherlands. After all, Britain and the Netherlands are already in such a mess. I think that perhaps further pressure on the Netherlands will have a different effect on our entry into Latin America. Little William regarded Bismarck as his teacher, but because of their identities, both of them addressed each other by their own identities. Bismarck smiled and asked, do you really think so? Little Crown Prince William said, isn't it? Bismarck answered the question irrelevantly. The Netherlands has been forming cliques and factions in recent years to pave the way for the Netherlands' global strategy and diplomatic war. Now, in order to curb the rise of the Netherlands, Britain is trying to win over regional powers to fight against the Netherlands' circle of allies. The Netherlands is holding high the banner of its own alliance ideology to fight back. In essence, it is forcing other countries to join the Netherlands to support the Netherlands. But you can also see that the diplomacy of the Federal Republic of America does not buy into the Netherlands' tricks. Little William nodded and said, Stephen Douglas is worthy of being the American president who is closest to the German Empire in history. His position is very similar to that of our German Empire. Bismarck said without comment, since the deterioration of relations between Britain and the Netherlands in 1876, the Netherlands has wooed American countries to join their camp, using the New West to isolate the Old West represented by Britain. The Netherlands even moved its capital to the Australian continent to make its geographical advantage more unique than the British Isles being isolated overseas. Little William looked thoughtful when he heard this. Bismarck took a look and said, "Since the rivalry between Britain and the Netherlands, the same diplomatic operation has been clearly seen again. If the strategic autonomy of the United States and America by President Stephen Douglas of the United States seems to be intended to divide the alliance of the Netherlands in the Americas, then the Netherlands is actually the United Kingdom's high-profile invitation trust to visit London, which is also intended to divide the close diplomatic relations between the Netherlands and us European land countries. Some time ago, Britain also conducted military exercises with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire and the Kingdom of Bulgaria in the eastern Mediterranean, trying to test the pressure on the Kingdom of Greece, which has the support of the Netherlands. Obviously, Britain has seen these countries' dissatisfaction with the Greek territorial dispute, so it tried to use Greece, a staunch ally of the Netherlands, to divide the Dutch alliance system, and then draw these countries to the British side in the Anglo-Dutch struggle. Little Crown Prince William said admiringly, "In this way, Britain can use other people's knives to cut off the rival relationship between the Netherlands' allies." Bismarck shook his head. "Not only that, your grandmother has a deeper idea." Little William, "What else?" "What is it?" Bismarck, "Your grandmother wants to use Greece as a pilot to make the Netherlands' biggest advantage, which is the diplomatic alliance system, become the Netherlands' biggest weakness." Little William, "How does the biggest advantage become the biggest weakness?" Bismarck, "Everything has two sides. Advantages and disadvantages are actually just a matter of thought. The Netherlands has many allies, but the interests of each country are not exactly the same as those of the Netherlands. Just like Greece, if it only supports Dutch diplomacy, the domestic people will not be a big deal. But in order to support King William II to support the Netherlands, and then go to the battlefield for the Netherlands, sacrificing Greece's national citizens and fundamental interests, will the Greeks be willing? Not necessarily." Little William, "What the Prime Minister means is that Britain is prepared to use the dissatisfaction within the Dutch allies to restrict the Netherlands and the allies." Bismarck, "Isn't Argentina an example now?" Little William exclaimed, "Back then, Argentina was the Netherlands' most steadfast ally in South America. However, because Argentina and the Netherlands had different interests on the Chilean issue, Argentina had long harbored ambitions for Chile. Back then, Argentina supported the Netherlands in suppressing Chile's colonial overlord Britain. However, after the regime supported by Britain in Chile was ousted, Chile did not lean further towards Argentina. Instead, the Netherlands directly supported the candidates it supported and even stationed troops in Chile. Moreover, the coalition army jointly formed by South American countries excluded Argentina. The Netherlands' intention to prevent Argentina from annexing Chile was obvious. In the end, Argentina directly turned to Britain, which was driven out of Chile by the Netherlands, and allowed the remnants of Britain to recuperate in Argentina. Argentina and Britain even entered a honeymoon period, while Argentina and the Netherlands deteriorated comprehensively and Argentina even became an isolated country in South America because of this. Bismarck sighed, "Your grandmother put a lot of thought into this matter behind the scenes. No one knows the process except a few parties involved, but it cannot withstand speculation and scrutiny. Now your grandmother is pretending to be a replica in Greece, and there are also forces in Greece that disagree with following the Dutch diplomacy. I think the Netherlands, a staunch ally, is not so firm anymore." Little William suddenly had an idea. "According to my mother's fourth sister Princess Louise has a very bad relationship with Crown Prince Frederick of Greece, because Princess Louise has a messy relationship with William IV. My fourth uncle, Crown Prince Frederick, is also very angry about the unclear relationship between his wife and his brother. Therefore, in many activities in Greece in recent years, he has not fully supported the Netherlands. This statement has been supported by the opposition in Greece. Prime Minister, will this be a breakthrough for my grandmother?" Bismarck's expression moved slightly, but he didn't expect this to happen. He secretly warned Queen Victoria's shrewdness and said, "This is really a good opportunity to make a move. I think your grandmother will not sit idly by about this." Little William, "Then Greece will enter internal turmoil if this happens." Bismarck, "That depends on the response of the Netherlands and Greece." Bismarck, at this moment, is full of curiosity and expectation. Will Greece be another touchstone for Britain's influence on the Netherlands? I'm looking forward to it. Chapter 880, Mother-Daughter Night Chat at Buckingham Palace. While Bismarck and Crown Prince William of the German Empire were analyzing their own views, on the other side, Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom was enjoying a shoulder massage from her second daughter, Princess Alice, at Buckingham Palace. "Alice, your technique is getting better and better," Queen Victoria said with her eyes closed, seeming to be enjoying it very much. Princess Alice smiled and said, "My queen, I have heard this sentence so many times that my ears are numb. I remember that you said the same thing to my elder sister Victoria." Queen Victoria looked embarrassed, opened her eyes, and said with nostalgia, "Before she got married, you were all the most obedient children under your father's knees." In the blink of an eye, 24 years have passed since 1857, and her children are 22 years old. "Alice, time is unforgiving." Alice kept moving her hands and nodded, "Mother is right. Little William is very cute and handsome. It's a pity that my elder sister has only one male child. As the second heir to the German Empire, she is too valued in Germany. Otherwise, he can stay with my mother for a longer time." Alice suddenly noticed that when she said this, Queen Victoria's shoulders became a little stiff. This is not an illusion, she felt it very clearly. Queen Victoria shook her head and said sarcastically, "Little William is now the favorite of William and Bismarck. Look at the arrival of this delegation. Bismarck even brought little William with him. And you also saw that little William directly refused to get closer to his cousins. Obviously, this is a precaution against our British royal family." Alice's hands were a little stiff this time. She had a deep relationship with Princess Victoria and Crown Prince Edward. When they were young, they had the closest relationship among the three. So she couldn't help but defend her elder sister's background and said, "Maybe it's because she seldom comes to Buckingham Palace, so she's a little unfamiliar, that's why she is like that. She just needs to come a few more times." Queen Victoria waved her hand and said, "The rise of the German Empire is unstoppable. It is normal for William I and Bismarck to have such thoughts. Victoria has lived in the German royal family over the years. Don't forget that our intelligence is not vegetarian. I know that Victoria is treated as a prisoner. It is said that little William was personally taught government affairs by William I since he was a child, and Bismarck was his mentor. It is normal for him to inherit the worldview of the two." She looked up at Alice and said, "Bismarck's invitation to come to London this time means that Germany is still unwilling to defend her British Empire." Seeing this, Alice had no choice but to change the subject and said, "At present, Stephen Douglas, the President of the United States, is promoting the theory of strategic autonomy. He is obviously unwilling to allow the Netherlands to further infiltrate the United States, but the Netherlands will naturally not be willing. Therefore, in recent years, the Netherlands has been increasing relations with various factions in allied countries. Even in Europe, the three Dutch parties have strengthened relations with parties within European countries, so as to see which one dominates American affairs and benefit from it. I think that Stephen Douglas's approach is likely to make the Netherlands come up with another surprise, but the American economy will pay a heavy price." Queen Victoria nodded and said, "If you say that Oscar II of Sweden and Christian IX of Denmark are trying to please the Netherlands for economic benefits, it is better to talk about the huge subsidies such as the Dutch Automotive Supply Chain Act to rob companies, and threaten to lose the Dutch capital operation mode currently existing in the Allies. For the competitive advantage of the Dutch government, these actions of the Netherlands are all retreating to advance, and bring various countries closer to its arms. With such an ally, it is normal for American President Stephen Douglas to advocate strategic autonomy." Princess Alice responded, "William IV has been very careful over the years, and he always does things beyond people's expectations. He has benefited from many events. This is not the first time that America wants to break free from the shackles of the Netherlands. However, since President Lincoln was assassinated in 1866, the power of the German Empire there was reorganized by the Netherlands. The Dutch in the United States of America have become the de facto first faction. Whether it is capital or politics, the top leaders of the Democratic and Republican parties in power are mostly Dutch. In this case, I don't think America can completely go Dutch. After all, Mother, don't forget that Stephen Douglas, who is now the most powerful person to go Dutch, is actually a fourth-generation Dutch. I don't think he really wants to go Dutch in American politics. What good will that do him?" Queen Victoria was stunned at first, and then suddenly her face turned bad, saying, "You mean, this guy may have been acting from beginning to end, opposing the Netherlands, just for us to see, or even, maybe he is acting a double act with the Netherlands?" "Princess Alice, it's possible. After all, It's best to be prepared for everything, isn't it? Princess Alice's question made Queen Victoria fall into deep thought. Princess Alice continued, "Some time ago, the American ambassador to the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Arrow, said that the Netherlands and the United States are allies, but not a united front. At that time, he said that the United States supports the coup in Chile, supports more activities in the four-nation federation in Central America, and even the alliance with Mexico. It is not selling kindness, but because it is in the interests of the Kingdom of the Netherlands." Now the attitude and policy of the Netherlands towards the United States, saying that it supports American democratic elections, but in fact, the purpose is to prevent the United States from breaking away from the shackles of the Netherlands. Many people in the United States can see this, so Stephen Douglas is likely to take this step first, or it can be said that this is the Netherlands needs an anti-Dutch leader to guide the anti-Dutch order and try to control the anti-Dutch process. Princess Alice said, "Mother, when the Americans can't even solve the Dutch infiltration, how can they support Britain on other issues? So the Netherlands is putting a lock on American speech, wanting them to have the final say, but leaving the lower class speechless. William Ivy's move was so poisonous that he almost played the rest of us in the palm of his hand." Princess Alice's words immediately made Queen Victoria, who had been calm and composed, no longer calm. Her eyes revealed a sharp light, and she said, "Perhaps your speculation is correct. Even Bismarck was kept in the dark. There is a saying that goes, the people who know him best will always be either his closest people or his enemies. Alice, it seems that you are still upset about it. Year. Chapter 881, Swiss-Dutch Alliance. 1881, Sweden announced that its King Oscar II and Queen Sophia Wilhelmina would arrive in Western Australia on March 25 after nearly a month of overseas wandering. They would arrive in Melbourne, the capital of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, before the end of March to hold talks with King William IV. This state visit invited by King William IV of the Netherlands was the first time that a Swedish king had visited the capital of the Netherlands again after 10 years since the Kingdom of the Netherlands moved its capital from Amsterdam in Europe to Melbourne in the Far East Australia in 1871, when the king's eldest brother, King Carl XV, attended. From the perspective of the Netherlands, this was the second state visit since the 1980s, after the reception of Queen Isabella II of Spain last year, and the first state visit invitation this year. The Swedish King's Evening News quoted government sources as saying that the Netherlands and Sweden had high hopes for the talks between the two kings, which was different from the state guest, which meant the country formally invited foreign guests. This is also the occasion to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the Dutch-Swedish alliance, promoted by William IV since 1862. The Dutch-Swedish alliance is the primary core axis of Sweden's foreign strategy and the foundation of economic growth. It is also considered the most successful case in the Netherlands' foreign policy. The prime ministers of the two countries are attending the Nordic Four Alliance Summit hosted by Spain in Madrid, the capital of Spain, and have held bilateral talks. A lot of behind-the-scenes work has been done for the Swedish king's visit. Oscar II's visit to the Netherlands will take more than 2 months. The schedule of the visit to the Netherlands is full. During the period, he will transit Amsterdam and Rotterdam in the European part of the Netherlands, and temporarily stop in the Kingdom of Greece. He will not enter the Indian Ocean through the Suez Canal controlled by the United Kingdom, but will go directly south along the Atlantic Ocean to the Dutch Congo territory, and then turn east directly at the Cape of Good Hope, arrive at the Dutch overseas island of Madagascar and stop for 1 day. After crossing the Indian Ocean, he will rest for 1 day in Perth, Western Australia province on the Australian mainland. Oscar II will not stay on the ship until he reaches Melbourne. Instead, he will take a special train in Perth, cross the Australian continent to the east, and visit the capital Melbourne and Sydney. After arriving in Melbourne, he will visit a monument of the railway construction route and attend the friendly exchange activities prepared by William IV and Queen Alexandra for him and his wife. The King's Evening News also revealed that the highlight of the second day of the visit to Melbourne will be the official welcome ceremony King's Talks Joint Press Conference State Guest Dinner. On the third day, Oscar II will deliver a joint speech to the Senate and the House of Representatives at the Dutch Parliament building, and then listen to the situation briefing of the Dutch military leadership. In addition to the diplomatic schedule, Oscar II will also complete the investment declaration ceremony of Swedish support for Dutch capital, the Swedish-Dutch Business Roundtable, the Swedish-Dutch Advanced Industrial Industry Forum, visit the world-leading Adelaide shipyard in the Netherlands, and observe the 500 nautical mile endurance of the Netherlands' most advanced third-generation underwater submarine. The United Kingdom, France, the United States and other countries are still in the second generation with a 100 nautical mile endurance, and they are imitating the Dutch technology after purchasing Dutch products, attend Swedish-Dutch folk-friendly cultural exchange activities, and attend political party exchange activities between the two countries. In particular, Oscar II will attend many economic activities this time, and it is obvious that most of them are here to attract investment and build the country in Sweden. During his visit to Sydney, in addition to these activities, William IV will have dialogues with many scholars from the University of Sydney and give a speech at the University of Sydney. This semi-official Swedish newspaper claims that the core topic of Oscar II's visit this time is the alliance relationship combining pragmatic diplomacy, security and economy. Melbourne, Australia. Cantor analysed William IV, at a time when Britain and the Netherlands are at odds. Sweden's old rival, the Russian Empire, is also ambitious in its external expansion, and the German Empire across the sea is awakening like a sleeping lion. Faced with these heightened threats, Sweden needs to specifically develop deterrence that can contain and control the threats. The concept of deterrence means that if Sweden is deterred by these neighboring powers, the Netherlands will initiate other protective measures to assist Sweden, such as economic sanctions against countries that threaten Sweden, and the Netherlands will unite with its allies in the world to put pressure on countries that invade Sweden and force them to retreat. These have improved Sweden's security and provided the Netherlands with a similar deterrent force as if its homeland was threatened. He said with a smile, "Everything is the same as your Majesty guessed at the beginning." The United Kingdom of Sweden and Norway is in an awkward position. It has the territory of a first-class European power, but because of its population of only 12 million, it is confused in the face of neighboring powers such as Britain, Germany, and Russia, which have more than 30 million people. Moreover, its industrial strength is relatively weak, and its economy is only medium in Europe. The cold weather makes the people more interested in life in the southern world, so they have to get closer to us. After all, the Netherlands cannot threaten Sweden in Europe. William IV called Cantor this time because many things are confidential and no one knows that he has always been calculating Sweden and other allies. Especially this time, Cantor has been planning to tighten the relationship between the Netherlands and Sweden for several years, making Sweden lean towards the Netherlands more obviously, because he had long expected this day to come. Sometimes William IV had to say that Cantor, this guy, was like a fish in water in the political intrigue. The royal think tank was handed over to him for management, which really made William IV much more relaxed in recent years. He designated the plan and this guy implemented it. The division of labor was clear and the effect was remarkable. Cantor, since Oscar II inherited the throne in 1873, he wanted to improve relations with the Russian Empire from the beginning, and then flirted with Germany and Britain, but we finally destroyed them. Especially since the 1960s, when His Majesty and former Swedish King Carl XVI promoted closer relations between the Netherlands and Sweden, the economies have been integrated to the extreme. At present, the largest Swedish capital family, the Wallenberg family, has business dealings with our three major companies, including the East India Company, the Far East Group, and the Netherlands United Industrial Group, and even has mutual shareholdings. So in fact, the economic penetration of the Netherlands and Sweden is very serious, and Oscar II also knows this, so Sweden can only choose to stand on our side between the Netherlands and the United Kingdom. William IV nodded. Indeed, although Oscar II was unwilling to accept the Netherlands' position as the boss in the relationship between the Netherlands and Sweden when he first took office in 1873, he had to give in after many setbacks. 1 year after coming to power in 1874, he even pushed the Netherlands and Sweden to continue discussing related issues through high-level extended deterrence strategic consultations, and developed cooperation plans such as intelligence sharing, crisis consultations, joint planning, and joint implementation. As Cantor, the head of the Dutch royal family's global think tank, said, "I hope this will be an opportunity to further consolidate the defense posture of the Netherlands and Sweden and to more specifically initiate the extended deterrence mechanism between the two countries." Cantor, Sweden is ready to use His Majesty Oscar II's visit to the Netherlands as an opportunity. The extent of the agreement that the two sides will reach and what content will be explicitly stipulated will be of great concern to other allies of the Netherlands. The two countries are finally coordinating a joint declaration of the King's talks or a plan to explicitly stipulate relevant issues in a separate document. Your Majesty, Sweden's public and full attention this time is obviously giving us the Netherlands enough face in front of Europe and the world. I have to say that Oscar II came well prepared this time, and we need to thank him very much. William IV, it should be so. Cantor, the banner of economic diplomacy is to strengthen the alliance of cutting-edge industrial technology. As shown by the Automotive Supply Chain Reduction Act and the Machine Tools Support Act recently passed by the Dutch Parliament, the Netherlands' trade protectionism and our country's centricism are becoming stronger and stronger. In this case, the economic interests of allies such as Sweden, Denmark, South America, Spain and even the United States, and how much share they maintain in the Dutch economic link are also issues of concern to all countries. So this time I guessed that Oscar II would be worried that Sweden's share would be reduced by us. It is also very likely that this economic topic will be an important topic of the talks between His Majesty and him. Regarding the suspense issues such as the Automotive Supply Chain Act, many Swedish economic officials have said that the strong will shared by the kings of the two countries has been reducing corporate uncertainty. The kings may discuss a comprehensive cooperation plan in a big framework during the talks. As Oscar II publicly expected before his visit to Sweden, he hopes that with a state visit as an opportunity, the two sides will discuss plans to strengthen cooperation between the two countries through dialogues between business people directly responsible for building and strengthening the automotive supply chain of the two countries. And dozens of corresponding memorandums of understanding are being signed. In addition, in order to strengthen cooperation in Sweden's heavy industry, light industry, military and national defense construction and other cutting-edge technology fields, Oscar II also emphasized in his meeting with His Majesty that he hopes more Dutch capital will invest in Sweden to boost employment. He also hopes that the Netherlands can drive Swedish heavy industry into the forefront of Europe's industrial powers, based on Sweden's possession of the world's best steel smelting technology. William IV, it seems that we do have a lot of expectations for our allies. I have to say that we cannot let them return disappointed. The news of Oscar II's visit to the Netherlands has attracted the attention of countries around the world. Countries big and small want to find their own interests in it. It is human nature for small countries to want to see if they can make similar visits and get benefits from the Netherlands as big powers compete. Chapter 882 Alexander II's Ambition. Tsarist Empire. St. Petersburg, Summer Palace. Alexander II looked at Crown Prince Alexandrovich and said unhappily, "The people I have entrusted to you recently have not been able to satisfy me. Tell me, how can I dare to hand over this country to you to manage in the future? How can you manage this huge country? And how can you face those old foxes in Britain?" With so many futures coming, Crown Prince Alexandrovich felt unprecedented pressure. Alexander II had psychological problems since he lost a leg in the failed assassination attempt in 1876. So he would be dissatisfied with many things and nothing was pleasing to the eye. From 1877 to 1878, the Russian Empire won the 10th Russo-Turkish War and obtained favorable peace terms. However, due to the interference of other powers, especially the support of Britain and France, and the suppression of the German Empire in Austria-Hungary, although the Netherlands helped him at the time, the Netherlands had a complete fallout with Britain at the time, and the Netherlands was outnumbered. Finally, the Russian Empire was forced to accept a mediation in Berlin in June 1878, which also made Alexander II's original plan to use the Slavic offensive to stop the Russian Empire's ambitions in the Balkans, but it was a failure. This made Alexander II even more extreme psychologically. At the doctor's suggestion, Alexander II turned behind the scenes and seemed to hand over some of his power to the Crown Prince. For this reason, Crown Prince Alexandrovich became the de facto state administrator. However, Alexander II still maintained a ruthless suppression of the domestic revolutionary movement in the Russian Empire, which led to an increase in the activities of revolutionary groups. After 1874, the terrorist momentum of the revolutionaries rose rapidly, and they repeatedly tried to assassinate the Tsar. The worst behavior was to blow off one of his legs in 1876. Alexandrovich also had a lot of grievances in his heart, but he had nowhere to appeal. Just at the beginning of this month, on February 20th, his father Alexander II publicly stated in St. Petersburg that he was ready to sign a decree to reorganize the State Council and start the political reform process of the constitutional monarchy of the Russian Empire, but on this day he was again warned of assassination. Alexandrovich had a lot of feelings in his heart. But looking at his father who still had a fierce look on his face, He moved his mouth, and finally remained silent. Alexander I looked at his second son, who was speechless and docile. He wanted to criticize the other party more, but thinking of his eldest son's death and his second son being pushed to the position of crown prince, he finally waved his hand and said, "You go down first and start managing state affairs as soon as possible. Starting tomorrow, you will follow Prime Minister Gorchakov to familiarize yourself with foreign affairs. Next week, you will go to the Ministry of Defense to find Milyutin, the Minister of the Army, and also follow him to manage the Ministry of Defense." The latter nodded, saluted, and slowly left here. Alexander I touched his lost left leg and couldn't help sighing. Not long after, Prime Minister Gorchakov and Defense Minister Milyutin arrived. Alexander I said with an unhappy look on his face, "Recently, the revolution within the Russian Empire has become more and more intense. You all know that the chaos within the Russian Empire has disrupted our layout on international issues." Prime Minister Gorchakov said at this time, "Your Majesty, the British have made a lot of efforts behind this situation. We jointly promoted the pan-Slavic movement in the Balkans. In the end, Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Turkey, Britain and France were dissatisfied, and Germany quietly stood on their side, making them dare not start a war there. Originally, they wanted to fight Britain and the Netherlands directly, but William IV and Queen Victoria were so tenacious that 5 years later, there was still a lot of noise but little rain. There was not even a small war. Or it was an agent war. In the Anglo-Dutch proxy war in Chile, the Netherlands eventually won, but Argentina's rebellion against the Netherlands made Dutch diplomacy lose face. So in the end, everyone got something. Alexander I, but this is far from what we expected for the Russian Empire. The Netherlands is such a loser, it's still boiling a frog in warm water, wanting to challenge Britain but not taking ruthless action, which makes our chances so small." Alexander I looked so disappointed that Gorchakov and Milyutin next to him didn't dare to respond. Alexander I's eyes fell on Milyutin and said, "Tell me about the recent deployment of our country's army." Milyutin, currently, Tsarist Russia has a total of 1.3 million regular troops. Among them, 300,000 are stationed in the St. Petersburg military district on the Balkan Peninsula, 100,000 are stationed in Lithuania and Poland. 100,000 are stationed in the Moscow military district to support all parties. Ukraine and Romania together have 100,000 people to deal with the Balkan Peninsula. Facing the Ottoman Empire and the Persian Empire, the Sochi military district also has 200,000 people, and the Nordic military district has 200,000 people. Siberia and Central Asia each have 100,000 people. The Far East has 50,000 people. Overseas territories and other regions have 50,000 people. As for the Navy, Alexander I frowned and said to Milyutin, "From the 200,000 troops in the Nordic military district that intimidate Sweden, transfer 50,000 to the Far East." Gorchakov raised his head and asked sharply, "Your Majesty, are you going to start with the Qing dynasty there?" Looking around our Tsarist Russian Empire, Europe has now entered a peaceful environment. Whoever takes action first will fall into the situation of group attack. Just look at the Balkans. As for the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire is now reconciled with Britain, and it is difficult for us to start. The Persian Empire is notoriously difficult to deal with. Britain did not dare to fight with those lunatics and chose to omit them. Naturally, we will not touch them. So the Far East is our next target. Milyutin and Gorchakov agreed very much. Milyutin smiled and said, "The Qing dynasty has many problems now. The two women with bound feet are in power now. It's very funny to say that they are ruling from behind the curtain. There is a saying that goes, 'Long hair but short knowledge.' Two women who have never been abroad are actually directing the governance of a country with 400 million people and making a mess of it. But it just so happens that such a country is the place for us to conquer. However, Your Majesty, it is said that Japan and other European and American countries are in there. Where should we start to make it easiest with the least loss, but still have value to use?" Alexander I looked at Gorchakov, who understood and said, "The 10 armies in Central Asia are on standby at any time. It is said that the Qing General Zhuo Zhongtang there will be recalled to their capital. We can tire them out again and cause some trouble for the Qing in Central Asia, but our target is their northeast region. Your Majesty, and I hope that in addition to Vladivostok, we will have more ice-free deep water ports there." Alexander I said with satisfaction, "Not bad." The three of them smiled, but would it really be as they wished? There are always unexpected things. Alexander II is such an unlucky guy. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 883. The Tsar suddenly passed away. The 19th century was a brilliant, yet mysterious world. The economy developed rapidly during this era, and the European Renaissance began here. However, it was also from this century that Europe established its leading economic position in the world, and its economic dominance remained unchanged for more than 200 years. However, this era was also the most dangerous era. Military wars came back every few decades. The last war was the Franco-German War in 1870, 10 years ago. 4 or 5 years earlier, it was the territorial war between Prussia and Denmark in Austria. 50 years earlier, in the 1810s, it was the Napoleonic Wars. Except for the Balkan Peninsula, Europe has not had a war for 10 years. Because of this 10-year period of peace, the European economy has entered a high development stage, just like the East Asian economies in the late 20th century, entering an annual growth rate of more than 10%. It can be said to be the golden stage of European economic development. Therefore, it is precisely because of this that whoever starts a war in Europe will disrupt this development trend, and whoever will become the target of European countries will become the target country. Even the Russian Empire, which was always known for its barbarity, did not dare to provoke public anger at this time to prevent the whole of Europe from targeting itself. However, the Russian Empire was naturally unwilling to be marginalized in this wave of European development, and the Russian Empire also entered a wave of reform. Reform will touch the interests of vested interests, and at the same time, it will create different paths. On March 25, 1881, Tsar Alexander II of the Russian Empire was about to sign a decree to reorganize the State Council and start the process of constitutional monarchy reform in the Russian Empire. But on this day, he was assassinated again during a private visit in St. Petersburg. At this moment, the first bomb thrown injured Alexander II's guards and coachmen. Alexander II ignored the dissuasion of his left and right and insisted on getting off the cart to check the guards' injuries. As a result, the second bomb thrown by the assassin exploded under his only remaining right foot, breaking his right foot. Alexander II lost both legs and died on the same day without treatment. The assassination of Alexander II immediately interrupted the reform process that Alexander II had prepared before. The Crown Prince King Alexandrovich came to the fore and took power, but he did not dare to continue the reform directly. Because of this, various hidden dangers in the future of the Russian Empire continued to develop, eventually leading to the outbreak of the revolution, and finally the Romanov dynasty was overthrown 37 years after the assassination of Alexander II. The Russian Empire, the hegemon of Eurasia, perished. The assassination of Alexander II made the royal families of various countries see the crisis. They have strengthened security precautions around them, fearing that the royal family members will become the target of venting of the people's opposition to the royal family. It is said that in Europe alone, the number of assassinations against royal family members occurred thousands of times in just 1 year. The assassination of Alexander II also brought great shock to the European political arena. As one of the most powerful countries in Europe, the Russian Empire was never despised by powerful countries such as Germany, Austria, Britain and France. The Ottoman Empire was even more relieved. After all, after Alexander II came to power, he launched 7 wars with the Ottoman Empire. His father, Nicholas I, had only launched 3. Such a warmongering man was assassinated in his own country, which even caused collective cheers in the Ottoman Empire. German Empire, Berlin. The Iron Triangle of German politics was still planning around William I. Unfortunately, Bismarck was still visiting London, so he was absent today. Minister of Military Affairs von Lane said calmly, "His departure will make the situation in Europe more unstable. We need to be prepared for it." However, there have been many changes to our plan, just as we expected. William I smiled and said, "Britain, which has been having a hard time breathing recently, can breathe a sigh of relief, but Queen Victoria may not be very happy." Moltke the Elder, "Your Majesty, you mean that Her Majesty the Queen of England watched her first love being assassinated to death? Is she sad?" William I shook his head, "I'm just worried about her." There were rumors everywhere before that when Alexander II was assassinated for the first time and lost his left leg, There were rumors that it was Britain behind the scenes. Now Alexander II has lost his right leg in his life. Britain has definitely become the #1 suspect of the Russian Empire. Von Lane, the recent Anglo-Dutch struggle has troubled Her Majesty the Queen enough. Now the anger of the Russian Empire must be giving Britain even more headaches. Moltke the Elder, who would have thought that we would come up with such a strange move and choose to attack Alexander II? William I said with a sharp look, no poison, no hero. The Russian Empire is surrounding us, making it difficult for us to develop freely. The Austro-Hungarian Empire has been frightened by us, and we have driven the French Empire to Paris, and even this country is still split. The rise of the Netherlands has deprived Britain of the means to balance us, and Britain is unable to take care of itself. As Prime Minister Bismarck said, the Russian Empire, which is already on the brink of civil strife, still has the means to balance us. Now the German Empire has really gained the freedom to show its strength. I am full of expectations for the future of our country. William I and Moltke the Elder were also released as charged. Moltke the Elder, Germany's geographical location surrounded by big countries has always put us at a disadvantage in development, but now we have finally broken free from the cage. The future is promising, but we still need to be cautious. After all, the Netherlands is also developing rapidly in the Far East, and Queen Victoria may not be as confused as we think. William I nodded and said, in any case, since we are going to exercise, we must do it well, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs still needs to pretend to do it later. On March 26, 1881, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the German Empire was shocked by the assassination of Alexander II, and stated that Emperor William I of Germany was ready to send the German Empire's Crown Prince Frederick to St. Petersburg on March 27 to participate in the funeral to express the strong friendship between the German Empire and the Russian Empire for generations. William I even personally drafted a morning article to show his remembrance and reluctance to Alexander II. The British Empire, however, fell into chaos. The inconsistent information revealed by various departments and forces in the United Kingdom made the Russian Empire dissatisfied with Britain. The British opposition Tory party called on the Russian Empire to relax its control over those who were dissatisfied with domestic political reforms, and to meet and negotiate with them to ultimately achieve the goal of a peaceful solution to the problem. The Foreign Ministry of the Gladstone government of the ruling Whig Party of the United Kingdom expressed condolences to Alexander II, and then said that it would send Foreign Secretary Greville to St. Petersburg to attend the funeral. As for the royal family, there has been no movement so far, and everyone can't help but stare at it. After all, Queen Victoria and Alexander II's first love relationship was forcibly broken up. How will the Queen treat the latter's death at this time? This has attracted the attention of not only the British, but also many people in the world. Chapter 884, Many countries mourn the Tsar's death. 1881, Alexander II was assassinated. As the Russian government announced the news, it shocked the world. Subsequently, countries expressed their condolences. At 7:10 on March 26, 188, the mourning period began. William I of the German Empire delivered a speech at the Berlin Palace, saying that this was a great loss to peace in Europe and even the world. He also expressed his appreciation for Alexander II's contribution to the world. On the same day, other countries joined the ranks. At 7:30 local time on March 26, Danish King Christian IX expressed condolences for the death of Alexander II. In a statement, Christian IX expressed condolences to the Russian royal family, the Russian government and the people for the death of Alexander II. Christian IX said, Alexander II will be remembered in history. At 8:11 on March 26, local time in Vienna, Emperor Franz Joseph I of the Austro-Hungarian Empire expressed condolences to Crown Prince Alexandrovich on the death of Tsar Alexander II. He sent a telegram to the British Crown Prince Alexandrovich to express his condolences for Alexander II. Franz Joseph I expressed in the telegram that he expressed sincere condolences on behalf of all the people of the Kingdom of the Netherlands and in his personal name for the death of Alexander II. Alexander II's dignity, dedication, and unwavering public image and service consciousness will become a model for people all over the world. In addition, the Austro-Hungarian government also published a long mourning article for Alexander II, expressing its recognition of the past of the Tsarist Russian Emperor. At 8:34 local time on March 26, the United States government expressed condolences for the death of Alexander II. Secretary of State Thomas of the United States publicly stated in Washington The United States has been supported by the Russian Empire since its founding. Our successive governments deeply regret the trend of His Majesty Alexander II. We express our sincere condolences to the Russian Empire, the Russian people and the royal family. At 10:11 local time on March 26, King Louis I of Portugal sent a condolence telegram to St. Petersburg, expressing condolences on behalf of Hwoteo for the death of Alisa. We express our condolences to the Russian royal family, Tsarist Russia and the Russian people. At 10:33 local time on February 26, while various countries were issuing condolences, the statement of the Netherlands, as the longest-term cooperative ally of the Russian Empire, was of concern. Moreover, as an ally, the Netherlands actually mourned for so long than other countries, which made people suspicious. It is said that even the Russian Empire was full of opinions. But is it really so? At 11 o'clock on March 26, 1881, King William IV of the Netherlands went to the Russian embassy in Melbourne to mourn Alexander II and announced a 3-day mourning for the entire Kingdom of the Netherlands. This news shocked the world. No one expected that the Netherlands would do this. At 11 o'clock local time, William IV, accompanied by Prime Minister Linden and important figures from various Dutch political parties, such as the Christian Party, the Socialist Party and the Liberal Party, went to the Russian embassy to pay tribute and publicly expressed condolences at a subsequent press conference. He praised Alexander II as an extraordinary and unique great Russian ruler and world leader. William IV also stated in Melbourne that the Netherlands would hold a 3-day national mourning. During the reign of Alexander II, the alliance between the Netherlands and the Russian Empire did not change anything. If there is any change, it is that the cooperation between the two countries has become closer. I forgot to tell you that Alexander II's father, Nicholas I, is my grandmother's brother, that is, Alexander II is my cousin. Whether it is a personal or national situation, it is wrong to question whether the 3-day mourning in the Netherlands is an exaggeration, because I should do so. Next, I will cooperate with the heir to the Russian Empire, Crown Prince Alexandrovich, who is about to become the Emperor of the Russian Empire, to jointly maintain the overall peace of Europe and the world. I forgot to tell you that Alexandrovich is not only my fourth cousin, he is also my brother-in-law. Don't forget that my wife, Queen Alexandra of the Netherlands, and his wife, Crown Princess Maria Feodorovna, are sisters, so the two of us have expressed satisfaction with the relationship between the two countries many years ago. Here, I tell you that there is no limit to the cooperation between the Netherlands and the Russian Empire. We will continue to uphold the intentions of our ancestors and continue to expand and broaden the cooperation between the Netherlands and Russia to maintain world peace and development. The Netherlands' belated condolence message is full of real stuff. All countries can only sigh that the relationship between the Netherlands and Tsarist Russia will continue in the future. Allies and opponents have different views on this. At 11:28 local time on March 26 in Madrid, Isabella II of Spain expressed condolences for the death of Alexander II and published the contents of the public telegram in the media newspapers. Isabella II wrote, "I express my condolences to the Russian royal family, the Russian government and the citizens for the death of Alexander II. Alexander II was a witness and writer of Russian, European and even world history. He was a figure of great significance to Europe and the world. The Spaniards stand with the Russians." At this time, the Russian Empire's ally, King Milan Obrenović IV of Serbia publicly expressed his condolences in the capital Belgrade. He said that this was the saddest day for our country and our most important ally and backer. Everyone felt heartbroken for the Tsar's death. He also said that Alexander II was so eternal and beautiful that we were like children, thinking that he would always exist and mourning his death. Without him, there would be no establishment of the Kingdom of Serbia in 1878, nor would we be as powerful as we are now in the Balkans. The King of Serbia was right. In 1459, Serbia was conquered by the powerful Ottoman Empire and became a province of the Ottoman Empire. During the Ottoman Turkish occupation, due to different religious beliefs, the Balkan Peninsula was never truly conquered by the Muslims of the Ottoman Empire. After that, in the early 19th century, it entered the Industrial Age, and the Ottoman Empire gradually declined. The Serbs finally launched a revolution with the support of the Russian Empire, which was also a Slavic country. In 1830, they were recognized by the Ottoman government and the Principality of Serbia became independent, although the Principality only had Belgrade at that time. You may have thought of the fact that Belgium also gained independence from the Netherlands in 1830. The Netherlands' allies supported Belgium's independence from the Netherlands, which was actually the result of a deal. Chapter 885, Provocation of the King of Belgium. Britain supported Belgium's separation from the Netherlands, and the Netherlands' most important ally, Tsarist Russia, received support from Britain to allow the Principality of Serbia to become independent from the Ottoman Empire. The Netherlands became the victim. It can be said that Serbia was the result of the Russian Empire's trade with Belgium. Therefore, the Netherlands has never had a good impression of Serbia. Initially, the territory of the Principality of Serbia was only the original location of Belgrade. From 1831 to 1833, the Principality of Serbia expanded in the southeast and west with the strong support of Tsar Paul I of the Russian Empire. In 1867, under the pressure of Tsarist Russia, the Ottoman Turkish army completely withdrew from the Principality of Serbia, ensuring its de facto independence. In 1869, a new constitution was introduced, which defined Serbia as an independent country. After the Berlin Conference in 1878, the Principality of Serbia gained wide international recognition and its territory expanded to the southeast. The Principality of Serbia lasted until the establishment of the kingdom in 1880. In the same year, there were also the Kingdom of Bulgaria and Montenegro, which actually marked the further decline of the Ottoman Empire. Therefore, when Serbia published a lament for Alexander II, it was sincere, but I think the Ottoman Empire in Constantinople must be unhappy. It is said that the Serbian king said that he would leave Belgrade on March 27 and prepare to rush to St. Petersburg in person to express his and his country's special relationship with Tsarist Russia. At 12 o'clock local time on March 26, Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom's belated condolence came out, but in addition to sending a telegram to Crown Prince Alexandrovich, she also published it directly and completely in the European Times. Queen Victoria expressed her condolences for the death of Alexander II, praising him as a role model and spiritual sustenance for trillions of people, including the British. Her Majesty stressed at Buckingham Palace that Alexander II made a great contribution to the peace of Europe and the world in the past, and this will not be forgotten. He will be missed, especially his elegance and humor. She reiterated in the article that she expressed deep condolences to Alexander II. Queen Victoria said that the news of the Tsar's death made her feel very sad and that with his death, an era is coming to an end. She also said that no words can describe the importance of the Tsar. His sense of responsibility and moral integrity, dedication and dignity have been of great significance to Tsarist Russia, Britain, Europe and the world in the past 25 years since he became the Emperor of the Russian Empire in 1856. The Queen said that she looked back on her interactions with Tsar Alexander II with the greatest gratitude. The Queen's words did not make people feel any abruptness or impoliteness. Whether as a first love or national administrator, they were all in line with the rules. It makes sense, but for those who like to gossip, there is nothing to talk about. Of course, the words between the lines can still be manipulated by future gossip media. 3 minutes after the Queen's condolence was published, at 12:03, British Prime Minister Gladstone expressed condolences for the death of Alexander II. Gladstone delivered a speech at 10 Downing Street to express condolences for the death of Alexander II. Gladstone emphasized that Alexander II's authority, rich experience and sense of responsibility for imitation will remain in the memory of the United Kingdom. At 12:40 local time in Constantinople, Sultan Abdulaziz I of the Ottoman Empire also appeared. As the old enemy of the Russian Empire for hundreds of years, these two countries are more powerful opponents of the Russian Empire and Sweden. At least Sweden is mainly defensive, but the Ottoman Empire dares not to fight back. Moreover, the Ottoman Empire has a strong territory and is still among the most powerful countries in Europe. The two countries have fought no less than 1,000 battles of varying sizes in the past 100 years. It can be said that hatred has been engraved in the bones of both sides. Therefore, many people are still puzzled and shocked by the condolences of Sultan Abdulaziz I. Local time, Ottoman Sultan Abdulaziz I publicly published an article in the Financial Times to express his condolences for the death of Alexander II. The world's most powerful sultan said that he was deeply saddened after learning the news of Alexander II's death, and expressed his deepest condolences to the royal family, people and government of the Russian Empire. Although Alexander II is my old rival, I still give him the greatest respect and dignity because I think he is a good opponent. Umberto I of the Kingdom of Italy expressed condolences to Alexander II at 1300 hours local time. Umberto I emphasized that Alexander II's rule in the past 25 years has witnessed written and shaped many important chapters in Europe and the world, and he will leave a solid and valuable legacy for future generations. King William III of Greece expressed his condolences for Alexander II. He is my cousin. I have met him many times. I met him many times during my reign in the Netherlands after 1848. He was a very talkative and upright person. I did not expect that he would go before me. My heart aches. The Kingdom of Greece, like the Russian Empire, is a member of the Eastern Orthodox Church. Athens is one of the birthplaces of the Eastern Orthodox Church. We are willing to cooperate in this regard and open up opportunities for future exchanges between Greece and Tsarist Russia. At the same time, I am confident that Crown Prince Alexandrovich will soon take the throne and rule Tsarist Russia. Unexpectedly, the Argentine government, which had a falling out with the Netherlands, also issued a message of condolences. Local time, Argentine President Mitre expressed condolences for the death of Alexander II. The message stated, "The Argentine government is grieving with the Tsarist Russian government and people at the moment of Alexander II's death." March 26, 1412. King Leopold II of Belgium mourned the death of Alexander II. In his eulogy to Alexander II, Leopold II expressed sincere condolences to his family and the Russian people, calling the Tsar a close ally of the country where Belgium was born and a beloved and respected ruler of the country. He praised that Belgium's independence from the Netherlands was inseparable from the support of the Russian Empire, so Belgium must have a grateful heart to the Russian Empire. It is very obvious that this guy has provoked the relationship between the Netherlands and the Russian Empire. This approach is obviously supported by London, so Belgium's approach is definitely not very pleasant for the Netherlands. However, the Netherlands is now weaker in its own European power, and it is now in a comprehensive hostility with Britain. The French Empire has a close relationship with Britain, so Belgium will not see the land ceded by the Netherlands and France in recent years since 1870. So Leopold II dared to do so. However, will the Netherlands really not retaliate? Chapter 886. We do not support the division of America, but after Alexander II was assassinated in St. Petersburg on March 25, 1881, other countries naturally did not want to lag behind, following the German Empire, the Kingdom of Denmark, the United States of America, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Kingdom of Portugal, the Kingdom of Spain, the Kingdom of Serbia, the British Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Kingdom of Italy, the Kingdom of Greece, and the Kingdom of Belgium. 1412 on March 26. At 1435 on March 26, 1881, Alexander Stephens, President of the Confederate States of America, a country of 13 southern states that Britain supported in 1861 to fight against Washington, expressed his condolences for the death of Alexander II. He wrote in the Times, an influential newspaper in Europe, that as ally Britain, he devoted his life to the rise and power of the Russian Empire. His sense of responsibility for the Russian Empire is unparalleled in the modern world, just like our first President Jefferson Hamilton Davis from 1861 to 1868, and our second President General Robert Lee from 1869 to 1876. I have been the President of the Confederate States of America since 1877. The first term was completed in 1880. This year is the beginning of the second term of the presidency. I hope that just like Alexander II during his lifetime, anything can be discussed during my reign. We are willing to negotiate with the Washington Confederate Government of the United States in the capital Richmond to maintain a relaxed relationship between the two regimes. Yes, we are not only willing to negotiate with the current ruling Democratic Party of the United States, but also willing to make friends with the opposition Republican Party. Everything is for peace. In 1861, after the 13 southern states of the United States, including Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama, Virginia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Florida, South Carolina, Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Missouri, announced the establishment of the Confederate States of America, they began to promote the rule of New York capitalists. These southern states expressed support for the economic model of the big planters and would not stop the practice of trafficking black people to plant slaves. So they fell out with the North. In the past 20 years, due to the lack of international support, only a few countries such as the United Kingdom and the Kingdom of Belgium support the Confederacy of the South. Therefore, this country, which actually became independent from the federal states of America, has few people interested in it. At this time, it is a good idea to pretend that Alexander II has died. Sure enough, the monsters and demons have appeared one after another. However, as a way of mourning Alexander II, St. Peter could not object. But the name is very troublesome. After all, the Confederate States of America in the North is a major American country and an important diplomatic asset of the Russian Empire. The Russian Empire will not offend the other party easily. Finally, Prime Minister Gorchakov had an idea and thought of a countermeasure. Even this kind of communication in the air can be used as a lever for the Washington Confederate government in the North in the future to increase the bargaining chips of the other party. Thinking of this, Gorchakov hurried to discuss with Crown Prince Alexandrovich and finally determined the target. In Melbourne, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, William IV felt very strange when he knew that the southern regime of the Confederate States of America had come out to touch porcelain. He thought of a rebellious child in his previous life who returned home. It seemed to be the same. Prime Minister Lyndon sat respectfully in front of William IV. The Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs immediately expressed its gratitude to the leaders of the 13 southern states in St. Petersburg. Yes, they were directly called the leaders of the 13 southern states. In this way, even Washington could not say anything. The Russian Empire was willing to continue to support the complete territorial sovereignty of the United States and did not recognize the 13 southern states as a country. However, the 13 states were not under your rule, Washington. This is a fact. Grasping this point, St. Petersburg's approach was not wrong. It's just that the Russian Empire has taken the lead, and Washington will become more passive in the future. Because other countries may follow the Russian Empire's title of the Confederate States of America in dealing with them, and even William IV glanced at him, and then said, "Do you mean that even other countries can deal with the Richmond regime in the South as rulers, whether it is politically, they can bargain with Washington and gain the upper hand, or economically, the agricultural products of the large plantation owners of the Richmond regime in the South can provide huge economic benefits for the agricultural product businesses of various countries." Prime Minister Lyndon nodded first, then said, "Yes, the Confederate States of America in the South has been established for 20 years. But the Washington regime in the North has not recovered and unified it. This has questioned our support for the North with the Russian Empire, and Britain's support for it has given Britain a base there." William IV agreed. Yes, Britain split America abruptly, and then America, a powerful country in North America, should have threatened Britain and Canada, but now because of the independence of the 13 southern states, Britain finally threatened it with a sword that did not penetrate deep but was placed on the surface of the body. Although the United States of America has achieved some success in business in recent years, it is like chemical castration in politics, and it is difficult to achieve great things. However, it is precisely because of this that we, the Netherlands, have developed influence in Latin America under the blockade of the influence of the United States in the South. Even the Republic of Mexico, which used to attach great importance to America, is not yet closely relying on the South American alliance established by us, and even tries to please us, the Netherlands, and has become our most important ally in the Caribbean. In short, the division of America, in fact, except for the United States itself, all other countries will benefit. Europe and the Netherlands do not want to see a strong America emerge in North America. In that case, America will become the world of America, which is what we least want to see. After all, 2/3 of Latin America are our allies, and we naturally do not want to see such a good situation destroyed. The same is true for our opponent, the British Empire. It just so happens that Stephen Douglas of the ruling Democratic Party of the United States declared that he was anti-Dutch some time ago. It's time to cool him down, give him a basin of cold water, and calm him down. By then, maybe there will be good results. Lyndon nodded in agreement. Therefore, on March 26, 1881, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Dutch government announced its support for the Russian Empire's interest in the name of the Confederate States of America, which was separated from the United States. It stated that if the provinces of the Netherlands were willing to deal with and do business with the southern regime of the United States, the Dutch government would not prevent local governments from having economic exchanges with the 13 southern states of the United States. The Dutch move caused an uproar. It is said that the Stephen Douglas government in Washington urgently convened a cabinet government meeting to discuss countermeasures. Chapter 887, The Divided America Can Be Hype. In the space and time of history, the United States is the country that likes to use people with different opinions in various countries to split the countries in the future. Now that time has returned to the late 19th century, the United States is actually the victim of this era. Perhaps, it is because of the distortion of people's hearts that they must let others and other countries suffer the same harm as they have suffered, so that they will feel satisfied. William IV was reborn, and naturally let the old rivals of his former motherland enjoy many of their former proud works, including supporting domestic opponents in various countries to expand disputes. Then, the Netherlands still took advantage of the different interests of capital congressmen to intervene in the internal affairs of the United States. In short, during the reign of William IV, he would not let the United States of America become powerful in North America. At the same time, the British government in London also announced that it would send more officials to communicate with the Richmond government. We will not oppose Washington's rule, but we will not support Richmond to fight back against the North. We support both sides to resolve their disputes through peaceful negotiations. At the same time, we can also act as a middleman to provide an occasion for negotiations between the two sides. Britain's statement is moving in a direction that Washington does not want to see. However, this was not what Washington feared the most. Because, while the countries behind them issued their condolences, they also publicly expressed their views on the international status of the United States of America and the Confederate States of America, which made the Stephen Douglas government furious. Telegraphs and telephones allowed information to be delivered quickly. In a short period of time, the desks of various countries were filled with statements from Britain, the Netherlands and other countries that the United States was recognized after the split. At 1500 hours on March 26, 1881, Venezuelan President Herrera expressed sincere condolences to Crown Prince Alexandrovich and his family and the people of Tsarist Russia, saying, "Alexander II is a close friend of Venezuela, a beloved and respected leader, who has long served the country with dignity, decisiveness, kindness and unremitting service. Venezuela is willing to stand in line with the Tsarist Russian Empire and the Kingdom of the Netherlands on the outcome of the American Civil War. We do not want to offend either side, and we support their peaceful negotiations." Venezuela took the lead, and other countries joined in. Ecuadorian President Moreno published a message of condolences at 15:55 on the afternoon of March 26, in which he said, "We in Ecuador have no hostility towards the United States. On the contrary, we have goodwill towards the United States. We will have some exchanges with the United States in the South, but at the same time we will maintain diplomatic relations and economic relations with the North. Of course, as I said before, we will not deliberately favor any side." March 26, 1881, 16 p.m. local time. The royal family of the Kingdom of Siam in Southeast Asia issued a statement to express deep condolences for the death of Alexander II. King Chulalongkorn V praised Alexander II's support for the Netherlands to maintain the sovereignty of the Kingdom of Siam when the Kingdom of Siam faced the French Empire's invasion of the Cambodian region east of Siam. His actions moved the entire people of the Kingdom of Siam. "We will never forget those who helped us in difficult times." He also said, in order to thank Alexander II for his support for the national security of the Kingdom of Siam, "From now on, the Kingdom of Siam will mourn the death of Alexander II for 3 days, just like the Kingdom of the Netherlands." At the same time, Chulalongkorn V also followed a trend in Bangkok to express his views on the status of the two sides of the South of the United States, saying, "We support the unity of the United States and its territorial integrity, but we will not make a final conclusion on the position of the two sides of the South at any time, because foreign countries should not interfere with each other." Based on this position, the Kingdom of Siam will maintain this position in the exchanges with both sides starting next month for political and economic exchanges. The statement of the Kingdom of Siam seemed to sublimate the Dutch allies' more detailed description of the problems left over from the civil war between the North and the South of the United States. This made many political elites in Washington feel depressed, but they had nowhere to vent. After all, what they said was very clear. They would not make a choice on the status of the country, and they supported that the United States was still a country, but it had not yet been unified. This was actually in line with the unanimous declaration of the Federal States of America that the South was just a territory they had not yet recovered, and other countries should not support the Confederate States of America as an autonomous country, two American countries, and more in line with their request that countries should not recognize the South regime as a country. It can be said that although Washington was somewhat dissatisfied with the statement of the Kingdom of Siam on the economic exchanges between the Kingdom of Siam and the South, the other party's refusal to recognize that the South and the North were one country still made Washington feel relieved. But is it really like this? London, England. Queen Victoria said to Prime Minister Gladstone, "King William IV of the Netherlands is really good at finding opportunities. Gardrakoff just made a statement, and the Netherlands took advantage of it and took action." Gladstone smiled bitterly and said, "Our British Empire has always taken it as its mission to split America." At that time, America showed its ambition to Canada with great momentum, and finally lost its overseas territory, British Columbia, on the Pacific side of Canada, to the other side. So we learned from our mistakes and fully supported the 13 southern states of the United States, so that the northern government, which had the opportunity to agree with the United States, did not dare to attack the South with all its strength. Relying on this, the North and South of the United States confronted each other for 20 years, and our military strength and defense measures in Canada were stabilized. Now Gardrakoff of the Russian Empire has made this wave of magical operations, but it seems to have relieved us invisibly. However, I always feel that Gardrakoff will not be that simple. After all, this guy's stubbornness in the development and growth of the Russian Empire is no less than Bismarck and the German Empire. I am afraid that there are many calculations in it that we don't know about. Queen Victoria took a deep breath, then said with an unchanging expression, "Gardrakoff did this right after Alexander II died, which is obviously disrespectful to the deceased. However, isn't that fellow Alexander Stevens of the Confederate States of America a little too proud to stir up trouble without our permission at this time? I guess he thinks his wings have grown hard and he can fly." The Queen snorted unhappily. "We should give him a warning and let him know that the British Empire can give him what he wants, or deprive him of what he has already got." Gladstone actually didn't dislike Alexander Stevens's actions as the president of the 13 southern states of the United States. On the contrary, he supported it very much, but the other party didn't seem to know how to read his mind. Newspapers all over the world were full of stories about the first love between the Queen of England and the Tsar of the Russian Empire, Alexander II, in 1836. The two broke up that year, so it was natural that they had a deep relationship. Now that Alexander II was taking action, it would be strange if the Queen was happy. He couldn't help but think to himself, "What a tactless guy." Chapter 888 Oscar II visits Melbourne. 1881, 9 a.m. Kingdom of the Netherlands, Australia, Melbourne, Royal Palace. Queen Alexandra and King William IV sit in front of them, King Oscar II and his Queen Sophia Wilhelmina, who are visiting the United Kingdom of Sweden and Norway. On the afternoon of March 25, 1881, Alexander II was killed by a bomb on his way back to the Winter Palace after the military parade. He was 62 years old. In her telegram, Maria described how Alexander II was injured. The Tsar, who still had vital signs, was sent to the palace. Maria described his process in detail. His legs were terribly shattered and his knees were torn, bleeding profusely, and his only remaining right leg was only half of the boot, with only the part above the calf left. Queen Alexandra said with a calm face. According to Maria, Alexander II died a few hours later. Even the sky in St. Petersburg had just turned dark on March 25. After Alexandra finished speaking, William IV shook her hand and comforted her. Maria seemed to be panicked at the beginning when facing this problem, but since she was able to send you this telegram, she has obviously recovered. "Alexandra, don't worry, your sister is strong." After that, he looked up and said to Oscar II, "Your Majesty, after listening to the letter from Maria, before she married the Tsarist Russia, she was called Princess Damag in Denmark." Oscar II, according to the news I heard in Stockholm, although the people are not fond of Crown Prince Alexandrovich who may become the new emperor, they like Crown Princess Maria who is about to become the new empress of the Tsarist Russian Empire very much. Queen Sophia of the United Kingdom of Sweden and Norway also said, "Yes, I pay close attention to her. She will be a true empress of the Tsarist Russian Empire." Queen Alexandra smiled bitterly and said, "But she is not completely satisfied with her new identity. She wrote to me in the telegram, 'Our time of peace and happiness has passed, my peace and tranquility have disappeared, and now I will be able to worry about Sasha forever.'" She hesitated, and then said again distressedly, because the terrible death of Alexander II often lingers in her mind, she began to worry about her husband's safety. William IV patted her hands again and consoled her, "Don't worry, Maria, Denmark is strong enough." At least she was comforted by her beloved sister, the Queen of the Netherlands, at the funeral of Alexander II. Queen Alexandra raised her head suddenly and looked at William IV in disbelief. "Oscar II, King of the United Kingdom of Sweden and Norway, and Queen Sophia beside her also looked at William IV in surprise. William IV nodded and said, "Your guesses are all correct. I think that Alexandra will leave Melbourne for St. Petersburg on behalf of the Kingdom of the Netherlands and herself starting tomorrow to attend the funeral of Tsar Alexander II of the Russian Empire on April 20th. And Alexandra, if you are worried about Maria, you can stay in the Russian Empire to accompany Maria for a few weeks after the funeral." Oscar II heard this and said, "Your Majesty's plan is not bad." Seeing the puzzled eyes of his Queen Sophia and Queen Alexandra, Oscar II said, "According to our intelligence, the Crown Prince Alexandrovich of the Russian Empire and Crown Princess Maria will choose to officially ascend the throne on May 27, 1881, and it will be confirmed that Alexander and Maria will be crowned in the Kremlin in Moscow on May 27, 1883, 2 years later. So His Majesty William asked Queen Alexandra to accompany Crown Princess Maria there, obviously wanting her to attend the coronation ceremony more than a month later. William IV nodded. His statement was not wrong. However, what Oscar II did not know was that in history, just one day before the ascension of Tsar Alexander III, the name after Alexandrovich ascended the throne, and Queen Maria Feodorovna on May 27, 1881, a major conspiracy was uncovered, which also cast a shadow on the celebration. Despite this, more than 8,000 guests attended the magnificent ceremony on May 27, 1881. Maria and Alexander II faced numerous threats and intimidation. Shortly after the ascension ceremony, General Cherevin, the commander of the secret police of the Tsarist Empire, urged the Tsar and his family to move to the safer Gatchina Palace 50 kilometers away from St. Petersburg. The Romanov dynasty followed the advice of others and lived in Gatchina Palace with Maria and Alexander II for 15 years. Their 5 surviving children were also raised there. Under strict guard, Alexander II and Maria regularly returned from Gatchina Palace to the capital St. Petersburg to attend a series of official events. Although Maria also participated in social activities in Gatchina, she had long dreamed of the balls and parties held in the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. Alexander II used to enjoy the company of the musicians of the Tsarist Empire, but he also often dismissed them one by one. Whenever this happened, Maria knew that the gathering would end. William IV said, "Since Alexander II started the reform of liberating serfs in 1866, the interests of many people in the Russian Empire have been affected. The serf owners who benefited from the serf system naturally opposed it, so many people were dissatisfied with Alexander II. Although Alexander II's reforms were welcomed by the lower classes, the progress of the reforms was too slow, and many areas were not participated in, that is, the reforms were not thorough, but only selective. Therefore, many people at the bottom of society had mixed feelings about Alexander II. Therefore, when Alexander II came to power, he would face the comparison of whether to reform or not, and whether to reform thoroughly or not. It is easy to understand that he moved his family from St. Petersburg to the Gatchina Palace in Moscow. The security crisis of the royal family of the Russian Empire hung over the heads of many people, and William IV agreed with the approach of Alexandrovich, the future Alexander III. Oscar II said, not knowing whether he was happy or not, from the beginning as the crown princess to the upcoming empress of the Russian Empire, Princess Maria has always been competing openly and secretly with Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna, the popular wife of Grand Duke Vladimir Alexandrovich, at social gatherings in St. Petersburg and Moscow. Their confrontation was also imitated by their husbands, which exacerbated the conflicts within the Russian royal family. When Crown Princess Maria Feodorovna knew that it was best not to criticize the Grand Duke and Grand Duchess in public, Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna also won the victory over the future Empress of Russia, and was privately called the future Empress Vladimir, an ironic nickname. Queen Alexandra's face showed anger when she heard this. Obviously, Damar, changed to Maria after arriving in Tsarist Russia, was not as good as previous telegrams said in the Russian Empire. She still had many challengers there. As far as she knew, this Grand Duke was the cousin of Crown Prince Alexandrovich. Alexander II tolerated his existence, which itself represented something. Fortunately, this guy was dead now, and Alexandrovich's position was stable. Suddenly, she understood why William IV arranged for her to go to St. Petersburg, because her sister and brother-in-law's position in St. Petersburg was not stable, and there were many clowns. If she went to St. Petersburg to attend Alexander II's funeral and coronation ceremony, then the Kingdom of the Netherlands would obviously support Alexandrovich, and she could also declare her sisterly love with Maria. Damn. It was killing two birds with one stone. Thinking of this, she looked at her husband William IV gratefully. William IV understood what the other party meant and smiled faintly. After that, they started chatting about some ordinary topics privately. Soon, Queen Alexandra left with Queen Sophia, saying that she would take him to visit the new palace in Melbourne. Both of them knew that this was to make room for the two kings, William IV and Oscar II, to discuss state affairs. After the two walked away and the sound of the door closing was heard, William IV and Oscar II looked at each other, and the former opened the conversation and said, "Sweden has developed well in recent years." Oscar II shook his head and said, "How can it be compared with the rapid development of the Netherlands? Speaking of which, we have to thank the capital support of the Netherlands, otherwise the United Kingdom of Sweden and Norway would not be a middle to upper economic development country in Europe now." Unlike William IV, who only mentioned Sweden, Oscar II mentioned the United Kingdom of Sweden and Norway. Now he is reminding William IV that Norway and Sweden are both places he rules, and the Netherlands, as an ally of Sweden, should not forget this. On September 18, 1872, Oscar's elder brother Karl, King Karl XVI of Sweden and King Karl IV of Norway, passed away. Since Karl's only son and second brother had passed away one after another, Oscar, the third brother, inherited his throne after his death. Oscar was crowned King of Sweden at the Stockholm Cathedral on May 12, 1873, and was crowned King of Norway at the Nidaros Cathedral on July 18, 1873. He was Oscar II, his father was Oscar I. Norway began to be dissatisfied with being ruled by Stockholm after the middle of the half-century, especially with the political and military support of Britain. Norway tried to legislate independence many times, but failed many times. However, Norway treated Stockholm, the capital of Sweden, as a brother state. It only recognized that Norway belonged to the rule of the King of Sweden, but not the rule of the Swedish government. It was the same national system as Sweden. So it was normal for Oscar II to be anxious. However, can Sweden really hold on to Norway, a territory it seized from Denmark in 1809? Chapter 889, Swedish Dream. According to William IV's intelligence, although Oscar II stayed in Sweden most of the time, he worked hard to learn Norwegian and spoke it fluently. At the beginning of his reign, he understood that it was difficult to maintain the union of Sweden and Norway. It was only thanks to the wit and patience of Oscar II's benefactor that the Swedish-Norwegian United Kingdom was maintained, but William IV knew that if history did not change, the union would be peacefully dissolved in 1905 without the outbreak of war. The Norwegian parliament abolished his throne on June 7, 1905, and he himself gave up the throne of the King of Norway on October 26. In recent years, William IV intentionally or unintentionally, more than 60% of the Dutch capital in the Swedish-Norwegian United Kingdom has been invested in the construction of Norway. William IV knew that Oscar II in front of him had begun to doubt the ambition of the Netherlands to do so. After all, in 1862, Karl XVI of Sweden destroyed the British conspiracy to support Norway's independence with the support of the Netherlands and other countries. Now it is understandable to doubt whether the Netherlands is following the British approach. However, the Netherlands is not strong enough at the moment, and Britain's offensive against the Netherlands is increasing unprecedentedly. The Netherlands still needs to deal with it carefully, so it needs to appease and give the other party a reassurance. If you want a horse to run, you still need to feed it grass. The United Kingdom of Sweden and Norway as a whole has never been a problem in the Netherlands. His Majesty Oscar II can completely put this worry aside. It seems that William IV's appeasement has had a small effect. Oscar II's face turned from cloudy to sunny, and the worry on his face turned into a smile. He changed his face very quickly. This is what William IV thought in his heart. This person is worthy of being one of the monarchs of the Kingdom of Sweden with a good status. Oscar II has extraordinary wisdom and international vision. He quickly found a position for himself in the international arena, and did what a big country does even though he is not a big country, highlighting Sweden's international status as a big country. Therefore, he has played an important role as an international arbitrator many times in history. The three major emerging and traditional powers, the German Empire, Britain and the United States, even asked him to serve as the Chief Justice of Samoa in 1889. In 1897, He was authorized to serve as the arbitrator of the Venezuelan dispute when necessary. In the same year, he also arbitrated the Anglo-American Arbitration Treaty, which was declared invalid by the U.S. Senate. He supported Britain in the Second Boer War, 1899–1902, in a high-profile manner, especially in the statement published in the Times on May 2, 1900, which made him gain many friends in Britain. He was quick to act and do things, so he was very popular internationally and could be called the European version of the Jack of all trades. Therefore, he was awarded the honor of the 1027th Knight of the Spanish Order of the Golden Fleece and the 774th Knight of the British Order of the Garter. Facing this jack-of-all-trades person in front of him, William IV naturally did not sincerely think that the other party recognized the Netherlands. Relatively speaking, he preferred Oscar II's elder brother, Charles XV. At least during the latter's reign, there were no major changes in the Netherlands and Sweden. Perhaps William IV's statement satisfied Oscar II, so he said, "There are many changes in the Russian Empire at present. The Netherlands and Sweden are countries with many interests entangled with the Russian Empire, so any changes there will have an impact on us." He sighed, "I didn't expect that Alexander II passed away just after I left Stockholm. It's really fate. Your Majesty William, isn't it a coincidence that the Netherlands is dueling with Britain, and then the revolutionaries of the Russian Empire launched an assassination attempt on Alexander II? I suspect that this incident is not simply a dispute within the Russian Empire. It is obviously very conspiracy-filled." William IV immediately showed a serious face and said, "Are you suspicious?" Oscar II nodded and said, "I think Britain is more involved. After all, the relationship between the Netherlands and the Russian Empire has always been very friendly. Since the relationship between Britain and the Netherlands is tense, it is understandable that Britain defeated the Russian Empire, the supporter of the Netherlands, and made it unable to take care of itself, isn't it?" It seemed to be the case, but William IV always felt something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. So he nodded and said, "You're right, but this matter can be big or small. After all, hasn't the Russian Empire publicly expressed any questions to Britain? Britain is currently very restrained on the issue of Alexander II. Even the opposition party has expressed condolences for this, wanting to make the dead the greatest and let Britain stand on the moral high ground." Oscar II laughed and said, "However, the Russian Empire is full of anti-British demonstrations. Even in the Russian Empire, many newspapers are currently speculating and analyzing the role played by Britain in this incident. In short, Britain's moral high ground does not seem to have much effect, and the Netherlands can rest assured." William IV knew that the other party meant that under the Anglo-Dutch struggle, Britain faced the anger of the Russian Empire, and the Netherlands could rest assured, because in this way, the Russian Empire's chances of being wooed by Britain had been reduced to the lowest. It must be said that this statement is really correct. William IV felt strange again, but he still couldn't find the problem. However, out of courtesy and the other party's kindness, he smiled and said, "Your Majesty, Oscar is right. Britain is a little too busy at the moment." She stared at Oscar II and said, "However, this is also good for your country. After all, the trade between Norway and Britain is still 20% of Norway's foreign trade. This is huge, so the situation Britain is facing now can curb the other party's huge influence in Norway and prevent the Norwegian rebellion in 1861 from happening again." Oscar II nodded awkwardly. "Your Majesty William is right. The British Prime Minister Viscount Palmerston, who was the most powerful in Europe at that time, was the best at messing up other countries and letting Britain take the opportunity to seize benefits. It can be said that he was the best diplomat to reduce the domestic power of the opponent and increase the energy of his own country. This is how Belgium split from the Netherlands. In order to make the Ottoman Empire more obedient, the Ottoman Empire, its ally, fought with the Russian Empire, and then stood up to let the Principality of Serbia cut off from the Ottoman Empire. The pain caused the Ottoman Empire to have a shadow on resisting Britain from then on, and turned a blind eye to Britain's practice of taking whatever it wants. The British Empire, in this era, no one dares to underestimate it. When William IV heard this, he suddenly had an epiphany and thought of some strange things just now. He looked at Oscar II with some coldness. But this happened in an instant and it happened very quickly, so Oscar II didn't notice it. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 890, The Murderer is not Britain but Germany? If it were someone else, they would have been fooled by Oscar II long ago, but William IV, who is familiar with history, never let Sweden rest assured. Look at what history says. During the First World War, Sweden always stood on the side of Germany, because Britain at that time was full of ambitions towards Norway and was the accomplice behind Norway's separation from Sweden in 1905. Therefore, Sweden was very dissatisfied. From the beginning, it flirted with Germany and secretly assisted it, trying to help the German Empire weaken Britain, but it failed in the end. The German Empire fell in the hands of William II. In the Second World War, despite Hitler, Sweden still firmly supported the German Empire secretly, and even sent international mercenaries to help the German Empire. The intelligence on Norway was provided by Sweden, and finally the German Empire sent troops to Norway to defeat the Danes, including Bergen as the base for the British Overseas Navy. No matter how the outside world changes, the royal bloodline of the Swedish royal family has not changed since 1809 to the 21st century. This is the attitude of the Swedish royal family, that is, pro-Germany. Therefore, for many years, William IV has been on guard against the Swedish royal family. Even on the issue of Norway, the Netherlands has adopted an approach not far from that of the United Kingdom. In fact, if possible, Norway would have become independent from the United Kingdom of Sweden and Norway in 1905, before Oscar II passed away in 1906. Then, Norway did not like the Swedish royal family to send someone to become the new king of Norway. Looking around Europe, many royal families of countries were unwilling to offend the Swedish royal family, and the Danish royal family became the first choice. William IV secretly thought, if this scene was re-elected, could the Dutch royal family do something? After all, Norway is now very wary of the Swedish government, and has a love-hate relationship with the Swedish royal family, with more hate than love. If it were not for the hostility between the Netherlands and Britain, William IV would have hoped that this scene would come soon, but William IV pouted his mouth. My children have not grown up yet, it will take a few more years. The meeting between the two ended quickly. On the surface, both of them were very graceful and declared the friendly relations between the two countries, but under their own ulterior motives, the real things were alienating. After Oscar II and his wife went to the assigned residence, Queen Alexandra hesitated for a moment, then said, William, I think this couple seems to be very weird in many things, and some can't let go of the global chat. To be direct, it's too artificial. William IV pretended not to understand and said, others are not like this? What's so strange about this? Alexandra frowned and said, maybe I'm sensitive. Queen Sophia's eyes are a little evasive, but she is not very honest in her answers to many diplomatic issues. William IV heard this and was silent. Not long after, Wright, the director of MI8, arrived. Wright is a special existence in the Netherlands. He is only responsible to William IV. Seeing him coming, Alexandra wanted to avoid him and not disturb their meeting. But William IV kept her, listen to Wright's intelligence, maybe it will help you with your doubts just now. Seeing this, Queen Alexandra naturally did not object. Wright naturally would not oppose William IV's approach. He got the message that he could start talking, so Wright said, in the past year, Oscar II has had the most contact with people in the neighboring countries who are relatively pro-German. Although he did it secretly, he still missed our intelligence personnel in their internal network. So our intelligence analysis team concluded that Oscar II seemed to choose to support the German Empire in the European situation, looking across the sea and helping each other. Queen Alexandra was stunned. Sweden and the German Empire? She couldn't help but interrupt the other party and asked, what about the relationship between our Netherlands and Sweden? William IV said, of course it's like the surface relationship now. Many things are just as they happen on the surface. After all, the Netherlands is not really the most powerful country in Europe. Sweden needs a dream ally that can provide it with fame and influence in Europe, but the Netherlands can't provide it. In addition, choosing the German Empire can kill several birds with one stone. Kill several birds with one stone? Alexandra looked at William IV puzzled. The 100 Years' War between Sweden and the Russian Empire is definitely a top priority for Sweden. We know this, and Bismarck knows this too. So Bismarck knows that the relationship between the Netherlands and the Russian Empire will not change easily, so perhaps over the years he has been slowly shaking the foundation of the relationship between Sweden and the Netherlands. As you can see, Sweden may have already secretly allied with Germany. Alexandra, then why are they visiting us so grandly now? William IV sneered, if not, if we can attract the attention of the world, especially the disgust of Britain, Oscar II will increase the hatred of other major powers and regional powers in the world for us. Alexandra, what's in it for them? William IV, there are many benefits. The first is to strengthen their relationship with us on the surface, and then continue to seek technical and capital support for the Swedish economy. In this way, it is very beneficial for Sweden to maintain the use of the Netherlands' finance and technology to develop its own country. This environment is still well created. Second, it is to increase the legitimacy of the Swedish royal family. After all, the Netherlands has been in the United Kingdom of Sweden and Norway for more than 20 years. Under the influence of economy and capital, the locals are still very friendly to the Netherlands. The attention Oscar II receives in the Netherlands is very important to his governance. Third, the visit to the Netherlands at this time is so big, in fact, it is for Norway to see. Norway is closest to the Netherlands. Norway has tried many times to be independent, but it has not succeeded. Norway relies on the Netherlands and wants the support of the Netherlands. Stockholm, Sweden, is very familiar with this. At this time, the relationship with the Netherlands is declared. The separatist forces in Norway naturally know that the time is not right. This is very important for Oscar II, so it is worth doing. Fourth, the intelligence that Wright just provided shows that the relationship between the German Empire and Sweden has secretly developed to a certain stage. It is understandable that Sweden is trying to get intelligence from us at this time. Perhaps the intelligence obtained from us may be very useful to Sweden and Germany. Queen Alexandra nodded. Obviously, she agreed with what William IV said, but Wright's next words shocked her. Not only her, but also William IV, who had always been calm and composed, had a huge wave in his heart. Wright, the director of MI8, said, Your Majesty, according to the intelligence we intercepted in Sweden and Berlin, the death of Alexander II may not only be suspected by the British, but the German Empire also seems to be a big suspect. Chapter 891 The First Anglo-Japanese Alliance. On the other side, Oscar II, who had been smiling all the way, was led by the Dutch royal waiter into the lounge for himself and Sophia. His face was no longer smiling, but serious. Sophia asked, that Alexandra asked me questions everywhere, as if she was trying to trick me, but it's not simple at all. Oscar II said coldly, Alexandra is the eldest daughter of Christian IX. Prince Edward, the Crown Prince of England, pursued her for a long time, but in the end she was William IV. I have to say, this woman is a good wife. Seeing his wife Sophia's dissatisfied eyes, Oscar II exclaimed, Alexandra has been the General Secretary of the International Women's Alliance, which was founded by the Netherlands in 1866. She has been in charge of it for so many years. In the eyes of international women, her weight and popularity are very strong. It is said that Princess Alice of the United Kingdom participated in it with the support of Queen Victoria. You know, Britain was still the most powerful and domineering country at that time, but in the end, Alexandra's position was not shaken. It is said that William IV founded the International Labour Union and is currently transitioning to her. William IV is a big abacus, and this abacus is clanging loudly. Seeing that Queen Sophia did not understand the expression, he felt helpless in his heart, but he made it disappear and explained, as the Queen of the Netherlands, Alexandra's image has always been very popular. But after serving as the General Secretary of the International Women's Alliance in 1866, she has become a popular woman in the world. Yes, not one of them, because compared with strong queens such as Queen Victoria and Isabella II, her image is more likable and respectable. To uphold justice for international women, demand family status and power, eliminate the inequality between men and women in the world, etc., not only has the enthusiastic support of women around the world, but even men also respect it. Now William IV borrowed this effect to give the International Labour Union to the other party, obviously continuing to add angelic light to her, and continuing to shape the image of the Dutch royal family in the eyes of the world. Facing Alexandra, who has successfully created a god, who underestimates her, that is disrespect for their opponents and contempt for themselves. Although Sophia was angry that her husband was dissatisfied with the praise of other people's wives, she had to say that Oscar II mentioned that Alexandra's appeal for international women's rights was very much in agreement. She clearly felt that women all over the world, especially in places like Sweden, began to awaken. In Sweden, women no longer seemed to be completely vassals of men, but supporters of men's careers, just like her now. Oscar I didn't talk to him so much in the past, but hasn't it changed now? Sophia said casually. Alexandra asked me just now that the economy of Sweden and the German Empire seems to be closer recently. Will the capital of the German Empire replace the position of the Netherlands there one day? I smiled and replied that it was impossible. Suddenly, she saw her husband Oscar I's face, which was originally full of smiles, was stunned and then unnatural. What else did she ask? Oscar I asked nervously, did she do it on purpose, or something else? Sophia thought for a while and said, it seems to be asked casually, and the others are some trivial matters in life. The others are trivial matters, but she asked Sophia about this question? Oscar I was a little flustered. So the next day, when he faced William IV again, he no longer had the previous indifference in his heart. Instead, he revealed discomfort everywhere. Fortunately, William IV seemed to be very friendly to him in the next week and did not notice anything. On April 3, 1881, King William IV of the Kingdom of the Netherlands and King Oscar I of the United Kingdom of Sweden and Norway completed the latest renewal of the treaty between the two countries in Melbourne, with a total of 6 articles. Its main content is, in response to the territorial expansion of the Netherlands and Sweden's neighboring countries, both parties recognize the interests of their respective territorial integrity. If both parties suffer losses in other countries, or if the other party's territory is invaded by other countries or suffers losses due to internal unrest, either party may take necessary measures. If one of the contracting countries goes to war with other countries, the other party shall strictly observe neutrality. If one of the allies is at war with 2 or more other countries, it shall provide military assistance, and it shall also consult with the allies when making peace. Both parties also guarantee the other party's illegal interests in other third countries. The renewal of the alliance between Sweden and the Netherlands was soon announced in the newspapers of the Netherlands and Sweden, and the alliance between the two countries became a hotspot for the funeral of Alexander II to be held in St. Petersburg. However, this is not just a highlight, other countries have also taken response measures to this. In particular, the alliance between Britain and Japan, 2 countries in the East and the West, made the situation even more bizarre. British Prime Minister Gladstone met with visiting Japanese Prime Minister Okuma Shigenobu in London. After the renewal of the alliance between Sweden and the Netherlands, the two sides also quickly completed the signing of the alliance. The covenant between the two sides was also made public and published in newspapers in Britain and Japan. After reading the Anglo-Japanese covenant, the world was shocked because this covenant was too shocking. The Anglo-Japanese alliance stipulates that Britain and Japan form a mutual assistance alliance to safeguard the interests of the 7 characters in Qing dynasty and the Korea Peninsula, and repeatedly oppose the expansion of the Russian Empire in the Far East. The most suspicious thing is that the main content of the Anglo-Japanese alliance, signed on April 5, 1881, is the expansion of the Russian Empire in the Far East. Both parties recognize the independence of Qing dynasty and Korea. After that, everyone saw that this alliance actually copied all the terms of the alliance between the Netherlands and Sweden. It's just that both sides have more specific locations to protect Britain's illegal interests in Qing dynasty, Japan and the Korea Peninsula. And more importantly, Britain actually recognizes Japan's right to protect Korea and stipulates that Britain can provide military assistance at its discretion when attacked by any third country. The terms of the alliance signed by the Anglo-Japanese alliance can be said to be absolutely of great impact, especially the practice of guarding against the Russian Empire mentioned in it, which made St. Petersburg, which was already angry with Britain, even more dissatisfied. The Anglo-Japanese alliance was aimed at the Russian Empire. Everyone knew that this was actually a huge blocking act against the powerful Netherlands in the Far East and the South. Britain's intention to take the initiative to contain the Netherlands became more obvious. Surprisingly, unlike the 3 musketeers of Japanese politics, Prime Minister Seigo Takamori, Foreign Minister Takubo Toshimichi, and Parliament Speaker Kido Takeyoshi, who eased relations with the Netherlands before their deaths in the past 1 or 2 years, Prime Minister Okuma Shigenobu and Foreign Minister Ishibafumi were so bold to ally with Britain. Was Japan really not afraid of a counterattack from the Netherlands? Chapter 892, The Dutch Ambassador Makes Trouble in Tokyo. East Asia, Tokyo, Japan. Now the whole country is immersed in the joy of forming an alliance with the world's #1 power, Britain. In the past, They were concerned about the Kingdom of the Netherlands, so in the early years of Emperor Meiji's rule, Seigo Takamori, Kido Takeyoshi and Amikubo Toshimichi did not directly implement the idea of forming an alliance with Britain. They were afraid of the reaction of the Netherlands. But since the three died or retired one after another last year, Okumu Shigenobu came to power at the end of the year and became the new Prime Minister of Japan, and began to put aside this concern, especially since the benefits offered by Britain were too great, so that the Emperor Meiji of Japan could not refuse, and finally agreed to the Anglo-Japanese Alliance Treaty. Since Britain and the Netherlands fell out in 1876, Britain began to lay out in the Far East, and saw that Japan was ready to raise Japan's status to curb the influence of the Netherlands there. Britain and Japan embarked on the road of negotiating a regional alliance. Japan is also happy to be supported by the world's #1 power to become a regional power, and even turned the tables many times. After more than 3 years of brewing, it naturally blossomed and bore fruit. On April 17, 1880, Ling Dong, the Japanese ambassador to Britain, proposed the idea of the Anglo-Japanese alliance plan to then British Foreign Secretary Granville in his personal name, and Granville also responded with a few words. On May 15, Lin Dong met with Granville on this issue and expressed Japan's willingness to form an alliance with Britain. On July 15, British Prime Minister Gladstone met with Lin Dong, the Japanese foreign minister, and expressed the British government's willingness to establish an alliance with Japan. On July 31, the Japanese government decided to adopt the policy of establishing an Anglo-Japanese alliance with Britain and formally authorized Lin Dong to negotiate with the British government on the issue of the Anglo-Japanese alliance. On November 6, Britain proposed the first draft, and on November 28, the Japanese government passed the Japanese amendment, and on December 7, the substitute Emperor Meiji approved it. This also marked that the Anglo-Japanese alliance finally entered the actual negotiation stage. After repeated negotiations between Japan and Britain, on January 30, 1881, Japan and Britain signed the Anglo-Japanese Alliance Agreement and the first Anglo-Japanese alliance in London. Originally, in order to use it as a trump card, or because Japan was afraid of offending the Netherlands too much, the two countries' alliance was not made public. However, with the renewal of the alliance between the Netherlands and Sweden, Britain and Japan no longer had it, especially after the opposition of Britain. Japan compromised. So the two principalities made the treaty public, but Japan insisted, and finally changed the signing of the Anglo-Japanese Alliance Treaty to counterattack after the signing of the treaty between the Netherlands and Sweden. This made Japan more comfortable when facing the Netherlands. The main contents of the treaty are as follows. The two countries mutually recognize the special interests of Qing Dynasty and Korea Peninsula. If the interests of any of the two countries are violated by Qing Dynasty and Korea, or a third party goes to war, the other country strictly maintains neutrality and enters the territory or more countries to help the warring parties. One of the contracting parties, Britain, will send troops to assist. This treaty is obviously a military alliance treaty against the Russian Empire and the Netherlands, and it has a significant impact on the future international situation in Northeast Asia. Emperor Meiji looked at the protest letter submitted by Maurice, the Dutch ambassador to Japan, in distress. Looking at the Dutch ambassador who spoke Japanese in front of him, Emperor Meiji had a headache. Maurice's protest against the alliance between Japan and Britain makes me disagree. As an independent country, Japan has the right to establish its own alliance system. We will not agree that your country opposes our alliance with Britain and terminate the alliance. Japan has its own national interests, so I will not accept the content of the ambassador's protest letter. Emperor Meiji's attitude was very tactful, but it also revealed his persistence in the alliance between Britain and Japan. Since Maurice came to Tokyo from the Netherlands in 1877, he has been very professional in his role of representing the national interests of the Netherlands and began to understand Japan. Unlike European countries, Japan is actually very conservative, especially in an awkward position. The Qing dynasty is much larger and stronger than Japan, but the Qing dynasty has also caused a lot of trouble. On the contrary, Japan overthrew the rule of the shogunate in recent years. In the early 1860s, the Meiji Restoration began to absorb technology and capital from abroad. Japan has become the fastest-growing native country in East Asia in terms of economy and industry, yes, except for the Netherlands, which is an outsider. The development of Japan's economy and industry has ignited an ambition that has never existed before among its citizens, that is, to defeat the Qing dynasty and become the most powerful native country in East Asia. So in the 1970s, they began to make friendly visits to European and American countries one after another. Every year, the foreign minister must visit abroad, which means more than twice, all of which are visits to Europe and the United States. It is not a piety. Therefore, Japan has been able to quickly establish a good external environment in the past 10 years. It is living a more and more comfortable life in East Asia. It was not until the Anglo-Dutch struggle in 1876 that Britain began to value Japan's position, which eventually led to Japan's tendency to restrict regional powers from being supported to become a great power. From then on, Japan began to play both sides, taking advantage of the bad relations between Europe and the United States, and getting more of what Japan wanted. But recently, Britain has forced Japan to stop like this. Maurice and many people related to the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs thought that Japan would follow the previous rhythm. Although they had long speculated about the hardliner Okuma Shigenobu, they still underestimated the other party's determination and ambition. The Anglo-Japanese alliance actually completed all the steps less than a year after he came to power. Even the Japanese emperor went the other way and changed his previous practice, agreeing and signing it to take effect. So after getting the authorization from Melbourne, Maurice, the Dutch ambassador, hurriedly asked to see the Japanese Emperor Meiji restoration. In the end, under the pressure of the Netherlands, Meiji still received him. However, after Maurice came in, he met the Japanese Prime Minister Okuma Shigenobu. But he didn't care and directly raised his dissatisfaction. As a result, the rebuttal and firmness of the Emperor Meiji just appeared. Maurice sneered in his heart and said expressionlessly, "The Netherlands attaches great importance to its relationship with Japan. We do not agree that Japan is the enemy of the Netherlands, but if Japan undermines the national interests of the Netherlands and supports the Netherlands' global rivals to besiege the Netherlands and damage the interests of the Netherlands, then we will not easily compromise. We will fight back and retaliate against this. Our noble lady of Siva can understand the strength of our counterattack. Don't regret it later." Maurice's words were very unreasonable, but he was very strong. However, the Emperor Meiji and the Japanese Prime Minister Okuma Shigenobu were unwilling to confront each other directly. However, the other party's arrogance also made the two of them very angry. Chapter 893, Lowering Relations with Japan. The deterrence that the Netherlands has established in the Far East over the years is difficult for Japan to face directly, especially the exchanges between the Netherlands and the Qing dynasty, which have a great impact on Japan's diplomatic space and ambitions. Therefore, Japan has been waiting and watching for these years, choosing the right time to take action. However, the diplomatic war between Britain and the Netherlands instead of direct military war made Japan, like the ambitious countries in Europe, very dissatisfied with the cultural attacks of the two countries. Therefore, Japan finally began to be unable to help and embarked on the road of the British-Japanese alliance. This is what Emperor Meiji and Shigenobu Okuma thought in their hearts. The two looked at each other and saw the anger in each other's eyes. Shigenobu Okuma said coldly, "If the ambassador can fully represent the Netherlands, then we feel that the Netherlands does not respect Japan enough." Maurice, "Respect needs to be mutual, but the alliance between Britain and Japan, without informing the Netherlands, your alliance is to challenge the interests of the Netherlands in the Far East." Shigenobu Okuma has never been so angry with this Dutch ambassador who speaks fluent Japanese. Maurice, "If Japan really values the interests of the Netherlands, it must dissolve the Japan-UK alliance treaty, so that the Netherlands will take easing actions towards Japan." I saw Okuma Shigenobu staring at him angrily and said, "The alliance between Britain and Japan has been signed. If the Netherlands forces us to withdraw from the treaty, as I said, it is impossible. Since he is determined to turn Japan from a country that was previously crushed by the Qing dynasty into a regional power, then the Anglo-Japanese alliance is imperative. As for the alliance with the Netherlands, Okuma Shigenobu and Emperor Meiji will never allow such a thing to happen. Even the previous Japanese prime ministers would not agree with this approach. Japan knows that the Netherlands is too strong in the Far East. If Japan forms an alliance with it, it will be swallowed and digested by it. This idea that Japan wants to rise is exactly the opposite. So compared with the Netherlands, making friends with distant countries and attacking nearby countries, this strategy that everyone in the Qing dynasty is familiar with, is also familiar to everyone in Japan. Therefore, Okuma Shigenobu's opposition was very firm. After all, if Japan really withdrew from the Anglo-Japanese covenant, it would be like slapping the British in the face, very loudly. Then, not only would Japan offend Britain, But it would also have to rely on the Netherlands to deal with Britain's anger. Japan would become a piece of meat that the Netherlands could slaughter at will, and the two would naturally not let this happen. However, the two of them were relieved in their hearts, because fortunately, in addition to the content of the Covenant Treaty on the surface, what Maurice, the Dutch ambassador, and the outside world did not know was that Japan and Britain actually had a secret clause to improve their scores. The secret clause actually also stipulated that the British and Japanese navies should cooperate in action, maintain their advantages in the Far East waters, or at least balance the balance of power among the major powers in the region. The Anglo-Japanese alliance was a military offensive and defensive alliance against the Russian Empire and the two countries' opponents. Britain supports Japan's ambitions against Qing and Korea, while Japan supports Britain's war tools to counter the balance of power. Before and after the signing of the alliance, Japan has been stepping up its expansion and preparations for war. According to the agreement between the two countries, Japan first strikes against the ambitions of the Russian Empire, the common rival of Britain and Japan, in the Far East to maintain the rise of Japan in East and North Asia. After success, Japan is willing to accept Britain's strategy to counter the Netherlands' dominant territorial advantage in the Far East. So both of them have something to hide, so they did not speak ill of the head of the Dutch embassy, but appeased each other first. After seeing the emperor's look, Okuma Shigenobu stood up and said, "Japan's plan to support the development of friendly relations with the Netherlands has never changed. This is also the reason why the Netherlands is the country that has introduced the most capital to Japan and the earliest country in Japan's opening up to the outside world over the past 100 years. Our two countries have been conducting trade exchanges since the 17th century. In the era of the Dutch maritime coachman, Japan was one of the transit stations for the Netherlands in the Far East. We respect the Netherlands very much." Before, the Kingdom of the Netherlands moved its capital from Europe to the south of Japan. Japan was very surprised to celebrate the arrival of our partners. So Japan is willing to have more exchanges with your country. We support more economic interactions between Japan and the Netherlands and the development of more economic undertakings. Morris, is it only an economic issue? As the strong party, Morris was not afraid even when facing the prime minister of a country. He even looked down on him. He continued to say strongly, "Japan has used the Netherlands as transportation for 100 or 200 years to obtain many advanced technologies and capital from Europe and develop and strengthen itself. However, the Netherlands is increasingly unable to understand why Japan's protection of Dutch interests is not in place. The attitude of the Netherlands towards Britain is clear on the surface, but Japan tells the Netherlands that it respects the other party, but on the other hand, it is damaging the political and diplomatic interests of the Netherlands. We will not communicate the practice of separating politics and economy, because what the Netherlands needs is a stable partner, a partner that can cooperate with us in both economics and politics. If we know that the other party does not support the interests of the Netherlands, then the Netherlands will not give up." Seeing this, Emperor Meiji asked anxiously, "What do you mean?" It must be said that the capital and technology of the Netherlands are at the leading level in the world. If it were 10 years ago, Britain might still be able to compete with the Netherlands in technology and financial capital, but after the Netherlands' GDP in 1870 was the same as that of the United Kingdom, the industrial technology of the Netherlands was even more difficult for the United Kingdom to directly compare. The Netherlands has received the most powerful returns in the world in the development of the industrial field in recent years. If Japan wants to develop into a regional or even world power, then it will enter a period of slow development without the technical support of the most advanced countries in capital will leave the Netherlands. The employment increased by capital investment is even more terrifying for Japan, and the unemployment rate formed is even more terrifying. So Emperor Meiji was very flustered. He was afraid that a Meiji restoration of the past 20 years would return to the pre-liberation era. Okuma Shigenobu also realized the seriousness of the situation, so his attitude was unprecedentedly relaxed. He even looked down at the extremely arrogant Maurice and said softly, "Japan has no intention of confronting the Netherlands. We just hope to have another ally. If the Netherlands agrees, we will sign the same treaty with the Netherlands." Maurice shook his head and said, "The Netherlands' allies have always supported us unilaterally and have never been fence-sitters. We don't want allies who are fence-sitters, so we can't communicate with the Prime Minister." Maurice showed an unprecedented firm expression on his face, which startled Emperor Meiji and Okuma Shigenobu. They had a bad premonition in their hearts. As expected, Maurice, the Dutch ambassador to Japan, said very seriously, In view of the fact that Japan has seriously damaged the interests of the Netherlands, I, on behalf of the Dutch government, formally submitted diplomatic protest to your country. At the same time, we will officially downgrade our diplomatic relations with your country to the level of charge d'affaires after this week. At the same time, the Netherlands will stop approving all new capital operations for investment in Japan. By reducing the relationships and access channels, we can prevent Dutch-style industrial technology from entering Japan. Chapter 894, The Rise of Ito Hirobumi. 1881, the spokesperson of the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced at a regular press conference that they were dissatisfied with Japan's damage to the Dutch diplomatic interests and expressed their dissatisfaction with Japan's damage to the Dutch diplomatic interests. The diplomatic relations with Japan were downgraded from the ambassador level to the charge d'affaires level. Ambassador Maurice, the head of the embassy, boarded the ship that had returned to Melbourne from Tokyo to report on his work. At the same time, the spokesperson of the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs also announced that the Netherlands would prohibit new economic cooperation with Japan from now on, prohibit new investment of Dutch capital from entering the Japanese market from now on, and would not approve the transfer of Dutch industrial technology to Japan from now on. As the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs listed them one by one, Japan was economically sanctioned. This is the first thing that people from all countries think of. Everyone couldn't help but think of the French Empire that invaded the Kingdom of Siam. It was also sanctioned by the Netherlands in 1868, and finally forced the French Empire to suffer heavy losses, especially when the Netherlands' allies joined one after another. Now Japan has also become the target of Dutch sanctions, and the Netherlands' actions have shocked the world. In Tokyo, it is now an ant on the hot pot, panicking. This was the first time that the Meiji Emperor of Japan had an unprecedented solemn look on his face since he ascended the throne. He scolded the two people in front of him and said, "Okuma Shijinobu and Ito Hirobumi, the now extremely powerful Netherlands has publicly stated that it will sanction Japan. You two vowed that the Netherlands would not react too much to the alliance with Britain. Is the Netherlands' reaction now considered big?" The once powerful French Empire was directly sanctioned by the Netherlands and its allies, reducing the country's total economic GDP by 1/4. That was when other countries around it did not join the anti-French movement, especially when powerful countries such as Britain, Germany, Italy and Portugal did not cut off their economic ties with France. Japan is now at odds with the Qing dynasty, and its relations with Korea are at a historic low, not to mention the Netherlands in the south. We are almost about to break off diplomatic relations. Looking around, although America is okay, it is a long way away and distant water cannot save nearby fire. What's more, the United States of America has always been very afraid of the Netherlands. I am worried that under the sanctions of the Netherlands, the United States may even lean towards the Netherlands, and it is not impossible for it to follow the sanctions against us. Facing the most serious diplomatic incident since the Meiji Restoration in 1868, and also the biggest economic crisis since I ascended the throne as the Emperor of Japan in 1867, the choice before us now will be the key to determining the success or failure of Japan in the future. Can you two tell me what you think? Although the question was asked very softly, in fact, the tone and expression were more like dissatisfied questioning. Emperor Meiji was really annoyed and scared this time. After all, according to his expectation, Japan should sit back and watch Europe and America fight, secretly learn Western technology, make friends with all Western countries, and then sit back and reap the benefits of being wooed by Western countries. This was the Japanese development model established by Emperor Meiji and his early Meiji Restoration, three swordsmen Seigo Takamori, Kido Takeyoshi and Takubo Toshimichi. But now, with the death of those three people, although these two guys have inherited the positions of those three people, their ways of doing things are completely different. This made Emperor Meiji feel that the management of the country seemed to be out of his control, which made him feel panic. Japanese Prime Minister Okuma Shijinobu and Foreign Minister Ito Hirobumi were also very helpless at this time. They are both among the most powerful people in Japan. They are actually political enemies because they are the leaders of the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party of Japan respectively. In the 13th year of Emperor Meiji, 1880, after the three heroes of Meiji, Seigo Takamori, Kido Takeyoshi and Takubo Toshimichi, died one after another, the most powerful figures in the political world were Ito Hirobumi and Okuma Shijinobu. In that year, Ito Hirobumi secretly united the Satsuma and Chushu bureaucrats and the royal palace ministers in the government to launch the Meiji 13th coup, excluding the political tough opponent Okuma Shigenobu. From then on, Ito Hirobumi became the #1 figure in Japanese politics. Although Japan has carried out various reforms last year and has begun to embark on the road of capitalism, in terms of foreign relations, the unequal treaties signed in the past still exist, which have become a serious threat and obstacle to suppressing Japan's independence and restricting its development. The European and American powers refuse to amend the unequal treaties on the grounds that Japan's laws are incomplete. So last year, after Ito Hirobumi came to power as the Prime Minister of Japan, Itake's Taisuke, Okuma Shigenobu and others successively organized the Liberal Party and the Reform Party, launching a massive freedom and civil rights movement, and the slogans put forward were to open up and formulate a constitution. In order to ease domestic conflicts, strengthen the rule of the emperor, and negotiate with European and American powers on the name of sound laws, strive for national independence, and establish a constitutional government, it has become an urgent task that cannot be delayed. Ito Hirobumi was specifically responsible for the ideal preparation. He submitted a proposal to the government, pointing out that constitutionalism has become a world trend, and it is necessary to follow the world trend, proceed step by step, and formulate a constitution according to the government's intentions. In February, Ito Hirobumi of the Meiji government went to Europe to study constitutionalism. Through observation, he compared the constitutions of Britain, France, Germany and the Netherlands, and believed that although the king has 25% of the power to rule the throne in the British constitution, it is not in line with our national system, and although the German government adopts the majority, it has independent power, the monarch holds the legislative and administrative power, and no law can be implemented without the monarch's permission. It can be seen that the state is the monarch, and the monarch is the state. He highly praised the German constitution and believed that it was in line with the Japanese national conditions. So after returning to Japan, Ito Hirobumi began to promote the ruling style of learning from the German Empire in the country. Unfortunately, he encountered obstruction from the conservatives in the end, so at the end of 1880, the 13th year of the Meiji Restoration, less than a year after taking office, he stepped down. Okuma Shigenobu and his Reform Party and the Liberal Party of Itagaki Taisuke successfully came to power. Idatsuna Taisuke became the chairman of the Japanese National Diet, and Okuma Shigenobu became the Prime Minister of Japan in 1881, but Ito Hirobumi became Okuma Shigenobu's foreign minister. This was a way of balancing the Meiji Emperor of Japan. Ito Hirobumi was used to restrain Okuma Shigenobu. Before him, Seigo Takamori, Kido Takeyoshi, and Takuho Toshimichi were also representatives of three forces. Checks and balances are very important. Therefore, Ito Hirobumi, the foreign minister, and Okuma Shigenobu, the prime minister, actually had different positions at the beginning, but because of the balance, both pretended to be very kind. In fact, they all wanted to put him to death. Okuma Shigenobu then looked at Ito Hirobumi and said, "Mr. Ito, diplomacy has always been developed under your personal guidance. I wonder how you think of dealing with the biggest crisis in Japan right now in the face of the emperor's concerns." Chapter 895, Betrayal of Britain, Secret Alliance between the Netherlands and Japan? Ito Hirobumi looked at the scrutinizing eyes of Emperor Meiji, who was born in 1852 and is now 29 years old, and the undisguised sarcastic eyes of his political opponent, Prime Minister Okuma Shigenobu, who is 43 years old, and felt unhappy. He just turned 40 this year, but he was extremely proud of it. Facing the questions of the two, especially the attitude of Emperor Meiji, he knew that he needed to list a set of rules, otherwise he would not be able to deal with the hurdle in front of him. Ito Hirobumi then said, "At present, the Netherlands has not completely severed diplomatic relations. This shows that we still have the opportunity to develop and improve relations with the Netherlands. I remember the sanctions between the Netherlands and France. Not long after the Netherlands announced the severance of diplomatic relations with France, it fell into a 5-year severance of diplomatic relations with France. The private economies of the two countries were almost cut off by more than half. The economy of northern France almost immediately went into recession, and even had less than 2/3 of its previous GDP, and the losses were heavy." Upon hearing this, Emperor Meiji said, "But now Japan is almost the same as France, and the Netherlands has also announced sanctions." Ito Hirobumi, although the sanctions are the same, the treatment of Japan and France is still very different. Okuma Shigenobu asked, What's the difference? Ito Hirobumi, the difference is that Japan is not like France. Not only are we sanctioned by the Netherlands, but the Netherlands' allies are also sanctioned countries. Emperor Meiji's heart moved, and he said hopefully, Mr. Ito means that the Netherlands has not yet launched sanctions against Japan from its allies, which is the same as not completely breaking off diplomatic relations, and there is still a glimmer of hope for us. Ito Hirobumi nodded respectfully and said, Yes, Your Majesty, I have studied the Netherlands for a long time, and found that every time it makes a diplomatic move, it will continue to deploy troops step by step, and will not play chess casually. So now that it has not directly broken off diplomatic relations with us, it means that the Netherlands still has a chance to give us remedies, and it has not allowed the Netherlands allies to join in sanctioning us, which shows that it is still unwilling to comprehensively expand the scale of sanctions. Okumur Shijinobu, if what you said is true, the relationship between Japan and the Netherlands still has room for improvement. Now that Maurice, the Dutch ambassador to Japan, has already boarded the ship to return to the Netherlands, how should Japan open up channels of communication with the Netherlands? A good cook cannot cook without rice. How should we explain to the Netherlands and ease relations? Upon hearing this, Emperor Meiji of Japan looked at Ito Hiroshi and waited for his good advice. Ito Hirobumi smiled and said, We in Japan want to overcome this difficulty. In fact, it is difficult and easy. His political enemy Okumur Shijinobu saw that Ito Hirobumi was still showing off at this time, so he sneered and said, You seem to say it lightly. Ito Hirobumi didn't care and said, Whether it is light or not is not up to you, the Netherlands has the final say. After he refuted, he turned to salute Emperor Meiji respectfully and said to Okumur Shijinobu, Mr. Prime Minister, why is the Netherlands currently imposing sanctions on Japan? Okumur Shijinobu said without hesitation, Of course it is because Japan and Britain have formed an alliance and signed an alliance. This is something the whole world knows. Ito Hirobumi, then I wonder why the Prime Minister thinks that the Netherlands has such a big reaction to the alliance between Britain and Japan, and what is the reason? Okumur Shijinobu said directly, Of course it is because the content of the treaty in the treaty offended the other party. Ito Hirobumi, I wonder which article of the treaty it is mainly about. Okumur Shijinobu heard this, thought for a while, and then said, It is the 4th article. According to the treaty, if one of the contracting parties is attacked by 2 or more countries, the other party shall provide timely assistance and fight together. Ito Hirobumi, I also think this is why the Netherlands is angry. Okumur Shijinobu asked. Seeing Emperor Meiji also looking over, Ito Hirobumi said, Your Majesty and Prime Minister, since you all know that the reason for the Netherlands' dissatisfaction is here, then the Netherlands does not hate Japan as a country, but hates the new relationship we have just established with Britain. If so, why don't we think about the problem from the other side? This time, Emperor Meiji was confused. What does it mean to think about the problem in reverse? Okumur Shijinobu also stared at the other party in confusion. Ito Hirobumi, the reason why the Netherlands is giving us a glimmer of hope is that the Netherlands wants to continue interacting with Japan. Just like most of the time when we interact with others, we actually do so with a purpose. Humph, the anger expressed by the Netherlands now is nothing more than the so-called offense of our Japanese to the interests of the Netherlands. To put it simply, Japan has reduced the interests of the Netherlands and damaged their interests. In this case, we can compensate each other on the point of interest. Emperor Meiji and Okumur Shijinobu were shocked when they heard this. Yes, compensation for interests will be enough. This is how people usually do business with each other. Upon hearing this, Okumur Shijinobu hurriedly asked, How does Japan need to provide benefits to the Netherlands? Emperor Meiji also said, If Japan makes too many concessions, we will lose more than we gain. After all, from the beginning, our alliance with Britain was aimed at Japan to obtain British industrial and military technology to enhance Japan's national strength. We can't get it ourselves in the front and give it to others later, which is also easy to offend Britain. Ito Hirofumi said, Your Majesty and the Prime Minister's concerns are correct, so we can focus on excluding these things when making a deal. Okumur Shijinobu, what do you mean? Ito Hirobumi, we can put the Dutch interest remedy plan on things that do not harm Japan. Okumur Shijinobu and Emperor Meiji. Ito Hirobumi, Japan's alliance with Britain is the source of the Dutch sanctions against us. In this case, why not make amends at the source? Seeing the confused faces of the two, Ito Hirobumi said, Our alliance with Britain is destined that we will not be hostile to Britain, but this does offend the Netherlands. Since we have just formed an alliance with Britain, breaking the alliance is naturally a slap in the face of Britain. It is naturally impossible to make Britain turn against Japan, but our relationship with the Netherlands is complicated. The Netherlands is extremely powerful to our south. We cannot offend each other, so we sign an alliance with the Netherlands to hedge the Anglo-Japanese alliance. This is my plan. Okumura Shijinobu and Emperor Meiji were moved when they heard this, but then they rejected it in their hearts, because they were trying to please both the Netherlands and Britain. The Dutch ambassador Maurice had already rejected Japan's two-timing approach. Now Ito Hirobumi proposed this, but it was still rejected by the Netherlands. So Okumura Shijinobu said, the Netherlands will not accept a plan like an alliance with Britain. Maurice has already rejected it before. You were there at the time, so you know. Ito Hirobumi shook his head and said, I know that an open alliance is not okay, but what if we sign a secret alliance with the Netherlands? Emperor Meiji, what's the point of the transaction? Ito Hirobumi, selling British intelligence to the Netherlands. Emperor Meiji and Okumura Shijinobu were both shocked. Chapter 896, Japan is really calculating. 1881, William IV sneered in his heart when he read the telegram from Japan in Melbourne. Sitting in front of him were Deputy Prime Minister and Senator Darnton, Foreign Minister Byte, Ambassador to Japan Morris and the royal think tank Cantor. Cantor said, pragmatically speaking, in terms of economic strength, what Japan and Qing must solve is dialogue with neighboring countries and mutual benefit in economic and trade cooperation. Only in this way can they maintain the development of East Asia and the Far East and the great power status they want. This year marks the third anniversary of the establishment of a semi-alliance partnership between the Netherlands and Qing, and the 15th anniversary of the establishment of an alliance between the Netherlands and the Kingdom of Siam on the Southeast Asian Peninsula. The Netherlands and the Kingdom of Siam have established a military alliance, and the semi-alliance relationship with Qing is also being strengthened. Especially in the past 5 years since 1876, when the relationship between the Netherlands and Britain deteriorated, the scale of the joint military exercises between the Netherlands and the Kingdom of Siam in the Gulf of Bangkok and on land has become larger and larger, and the time has become longer and longer. They are undoubtedly concrete actions to convey clear messages to surrounding forces, such as Japan, and the colonizers entrenched here, such as France, Britain, and Spain. Our military relations with Qing are also deepening. In their eastern waters, we have warships visiting the country's ports every month as part of a friendly visit to each other. Even, once every 6 months, we have military interactions with each other. And the Qing dynasty seemed to want to take advantage of the situation when we were at odds with Britain. From 1876 to 1880, in the 5-year medium-term defense force preparation plan, the industry reached the 3% GDP fiscal estimate we gave to the detachment to actively implement the Netherlands-Qing Security Treaty. The most important reason was to respond to the threat of Korea from pursuing Japan, especially Japan's attempt to win over Britain to intervene in Japan's expansion of its ambitions in Western Korea and northeastern Qing. Qing dynasty expressed its dissatisfaction more and more strongly and increased its military deployment around the Korean peninsula. William IV, according to what you said, the situation Japan is facing is also very difficult, so it will win over Britain. Under our opposition, it will secretly approach us and try to gain our support for them to get support from the West after their deterioration with Qing dynasty. Cantor nodded and said, yes, Japan did have this interruption, but correspondingly, Japan actually has more internal plans. First, from a macro perspective, the Netherlands dominates international economic and trade organizations and military organizations on both sides of the Pacific Ocean. The Netherlands has a huge influence in the Pacific Ocean. It is not an exaggeration to say that it is a hegemon. Moreover, it is not only in Asia and America, but also in the Pacific Ocean. The Netherlands also has economic and political allies among its allies. This is what Japan fears the most. After all, even the powerful French Empire suffered heavy economic losses and was sanctioned by the Netherlands and its allies. So Japan is scared to death. You must know that Japan is not as good as the French Empire. France is at least Britain, Italy, Portugal, Belgium and other countries that did not listen to the Netherlands were trading partners. But in the Far East, think about it. Qing dynasty and guerrilla are now at odds with Japan. If they fall out with the Netherlands, Japan will find it even more difficult to make any economic and trade moves. The Kingdom of Siam will naturally stand with the Netherlands. South America and the United States will also enter a period of economic decline or even severance from Japan. Only Western countries may continue to play with them, but Western countries are far away from Japan, and the foreign trade economy is actually very small. A ship takes more than 1 or 2 months to go back and forth, and there are only 5 or 6 trips a year. Besides, if Japan becomes hostile to us, the Trans-Pacific Partnership we have established will be completely isolated in Asia and become a lonely country in Asia. Just thinking about it will make Japan feel cold inside, so I guess that Japan wants to confront us in the telegram and express its willingness to ally with Britain on the surface, but secretly ally with us. If nothing unexpected happens, the subtext is that it will provide the intelligence with Britain to the intelligence we need with discretion. Dutch Deputy Prime Minister Danadang sneered, "Japan has a good plan." It proposed an alliance treaty to Britain, and then used this treaty to make friends with the Netherlands. The treaty it established has become something out of nothing and has become something of their value, creating an unprecedented good environment for Japan. William IV suddenly became interested and asked, who is in charge of the design of Japan's diplomacy? Foreign Minister Bite also said with admiration, it was a man named Ito Hirobumi. He rose to power very quickly, and he would always join forces with the most powerful forces in Japan at the time. When the other party was about to fall, he would kick the other side at the last moment and take the opportunity to join another party. He was highly valued, so he went to Europe as a student for 2 years in 1862. After seeing European politics, he returned to Japan in 1864 and began to enter politics. In just 10 years in 1868, he became a capable subordinate of Takasugi Shinsaku, the most powerful person in Japan, and he was unstoppable from then on. He had experienced the eras of Japanese prime ministers such as Katsura Taro, Seigo Takamori, and Okuma Shigenobu. Finally, he directly overthrew Okuma Shigenobu's power last year and came to power directly. Okuma Shigenobu was finally appeased and became the Minister of Foreign Affairs of his cabinet government. However, the two changed this year. Okuma Shigenobu was powerful and won the election this year. In a tit-for-tat move, Ito Hirobumi became Okuma Shigenobu's Minister of Foreign Affairs. Bite's explanation made everyone have a certain understanding of Ito Hirobumi, but William IV had the memory of his previous life, and he did know that this guy would be assassinated successfully by Ito Hirobumi as the director of colonial guerrilla when the Korea Peninsula was colonized by Japan in the future. However, it must be said that even William IV admitted that Ito Hirobumi was the most diplomatically capable person among all the powerful Japanese figures in history. Under his diplomatic style, Japan has historically formed alliances with Britain and Germany, and is also a semi-ally with the United States, and has a very good relationship with France. Even throughout the 19th century and the beginning of the century, Japan followed a foreign policy formulated by Ito Hirobumi in international diplomatic relations, and formulated Japan's own foreign relations guidelines, which made Japan benefit from the struggle between Europe and the United States, and made Japan's national economy and military capabilities gradually move towards the status of an Asian power after the Meiji Restoration in 1868. It was under the rise of Japan that the Qing dynasty was replaced as the most powerful country in Asia. It can be said that the rise of Japan was more timely than the Meiji Restoration established by Emperor Meiji, but the biggest role in promoting it was the blessing of the diplomatic environment created by Ito Hirobumi. Thinking of this, William IV said, Japan's calculations are good, we can use their own tricks to counterattack. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelists. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 897 Nordic Alliance Summit concludes. 1881, at the Prime Minister level Nordic Alliance Summit held in Madrid, Spain, the Prime Ministers of Spain, the Netherlands, Sweden and Denmark gathered in Madrid. The meeting lasted too long, a whole week, breaking the record for the longest international allied meeting. At the joint press conference, the four countries publicly stated that they had expressed their own foreign and economic policies. We have completed a draft diplomatic plan. We will specifically support the sovereignty issues raised by the four countries, especially the dispute between Spain and the United Kingdom over the northern part of the Strait of Gibraltar, which originally belonged to Spanish territory, The increasingly fierce sovereignty issue between the United Kingdom and the Netherlands over the Strait of Malacca, the dispute between the United Kingdom and Denmark over small islands in the North Sea, and the dispute with Sweden over the independence of Norway. The four countries have reached a consensus on the issue of Britain, that is, to support each other's sovereignty dispute positions. The four of us have negotiated on the issue at the same time, expressing further assimilation to the British position. We oppose the provocative behavior of Britain intervening in issues such as Norway and other countries, and we are even more opposed to Britain's dominance of Gibraltar and western Spain for a century and even trying to take it for itself. The four of us are very satisfied with the current alliance relationship and express that they have reached an agreement. That is, while the alliance relationship is further strengthened, the four countries are also drafting an economic agreement. In this agreement, the four countries will resume a free trade draft, which will become the world's first multi-country free trade import and export goods zero-tariff trade draft. If it is successfully signed, it will be a victory for the four countries. I forgot to say that the four countries have also signed a trade and investment draft, which can relax and support the expansion of the scope of economic investment and industrial capital expenditure allowed by each country within the four countries. The capital of the Netherlands can enter various countries from now on, and increase the operation of absorbing investment capital from other countries such as Spain, Sweden and Denmark. This will make these three countries one of the largest trade and investment targets of the Netherlands. At the same time, the three countries will also receive investment, increase employment and improve the economic level of each country. The above is the content of the interview of Dutch Prime Minister Linden in Madrid with the European Times after the joint press conference. Once this visit was released, it immediately attracted the attention of Europe and even the world. The Netherlands, Spain, Denmark and Sweden were allies. Now, as the political relationship deepens, they have also established such an economic alliance. This is definitely a lot of news for all countries, especially for major powers such as Britain, Germany, France and the United States. Because the economic and political relationship between these four countries is like God. For other countries, the area of conquest will be reduced, and the economic dependence of these three countries on the Netherlands will be further deepened. This is not good news. Until the Nordic Union Summit held in Madrid, Spain on April 10, 1881, the Netherlands will also hold a prime minister-level meeting with Spain. A series of meetings held in the past week have obvious political intentions against Britain and other potential powers. Military tensions are inevitable, and the impact of the economy will slowly emerge. Following the Madrid Declaration in the multilateral joint press conference of Spain, the Netherlands, Denmark and Sweden, it aroused strong dissatisfaction from the UK. The British Foreign Office even publicly stated, "This is not what a responsible organization should say. We do not agree with the statement against the UK made in Madrid this time, because this is actually an anti-British declaration. We think it should not be called the Nordic Union Summit, but it is more appropriate to change it to the Reaction Alliance Summit." After all, these countries, especially Spain and the Netherlands, are not very friendly to the UK. We seriously suspect that Denmark and Sweden are supported by these two countries under the threat of these two countries. After that, the British Prime Minister's office and the royal family also issued condemnations of the Madrid Declaration. Obviously, this Madrid Declaration made the UK like a frightened bird to a certain extent, and was touched by someone. However, other countries have remained silent, but it is necessary to have their own plans. It is said that in Paris, many people gloated and expressed their willingness to see the UK continue to be hostile to these four countries. Perhaps this is the mentality of having a good life and making others unhappy. As for Berlin, it is said that many people are willing to see Britain weakened. After all, Spain is too far away from Germany, and Sweden and Denmark are not as strong as Germany, so the German Empire is actually willing to see Britain's power become smaller, and Germany will continue to benefit. However, the relationship between the Netherlands and Spain has become closer, and Haitian has successfully made France and Germany wary. After all, Spain and the Netherlands are sandwiched between France and the Netherlands. Sweden and Denmark are bordering the German Empire. The deepening relationship between these countries is a burden to the German Empire and France. If necessary, the two countries can stand up and knock to avoid their attitudes being ignored. Of course, now is not the time. Dutch Prime Minister Linden then visited all parts of Spain on April 15 to further deepen bilateral relations. Spain publicly supported the Netherlands' strategic deployment, especially the deployment of troops in the eastern Mediterranean and western Greece. The two countries even publicly expressed their concerns about the situation in the eastern Mediterranean, warning that the tension in the eastern Mediterranean and the Banjar Peninsula has reached the brink of war. To deepen the situation, Spain and the Netherlands both stated that they would conduct monthly mutual visits at the naval bases in the eastern and western Mediterranean starting next month, further deepening the two countries' security cooperation in the Mediterranean, which attracted the attention of Italy, Britain, the Ottoman Empire and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Even the French Empire complained about this. However, except for the United Kingdom, the other four countries only stated that the cooperation between the two countries should not affect the interests of other countries. The United Kingdom was tough and stated that the British Mediterranean Fleet in the eastern Mediterranean would safeguard British interests at all costs. Many people predict that this is the largest part of the military alliance between Spain and the Netherlands. After all, in the past, the main places for the exchange of warships between Spain and the Netherlands were between the Spanish colonies of the Philippines in the Far East and the territorial ports of the Netherlands, but now it is between the Spanish mainland and the Greek territorial military ports of the Netherlands in the eastern Mediterranean. This is the first time that the military cooperation between the two countries has expanded to here. You must know that Greece is located in the southernmost part of the Balkan Peninsula. These two countries are looking at this and want to further deepen the presence in the Balkan Peninsula. The two countries are destined to intervene in the powder keg. The holding of the four-nation Nordic summit has brought a political situation in Europe into a new era of turmoil. At the time when Britain and the Netherlands entered the sixth year of the struggle this year, when the world situation is chaotic and unclear, whether they can play a more active role in promoting the development and cooperation between the Netherlands and other countries, which is different from previous organizations, is not optimistic about the world situation. Does the Netherlands' investment and military support for these three countries reflect its confidence in strengthening the status of these three countries in Europe? Or is the Netherlands playing a big game and trying to make a layout? In short, the Netherlands' actions have left more people confused and puzzled. Chapter 898. The German Crown Prince comes to America to break the situation. 1881, Crown Prince Frederick of the German Empire personally went to Richmond, the capital of the Confederate States of America, which had split from the southern part of the United States, and was warmly welcomed by Alexander Stephens, the president of the 13 states. This aroused dissatisfaction in the northern United States of America. After all, over the years, only Britain and a few small countries with Britain as the boss have maintained tense diplomatic relations with Richmond. Under the face and pressure of other countries, politicians from various countries will not visit the southern government. Now that Crown Prince Frederick of Germany has taken the lead in setting foot in Richmond, it has given the Richmond regime in the South a window of opportunity to break through the diplomatic breakthrough. This naturally made Washington very dissatisfied. So Washington's Secretary of State Thomas urgently summoned the German Empire's ambassador to the Federal States of America and expressed strong dissatisfaction. The German Empire seemed to have a plan in place. Prime Minister Bismarck in Berlin said directly, "We have no intention of changing our consistent practice of recognizing Washington as the only legitimate government of the United States." However, facing the Richmond regime in the South, which also has 12 million Americans, we should not ignore their living conditions and economic benefits to the German Empire. Therefore, we do not think that Crown Prince Frederick's visit is a political action to offend Washington in the North. On the contrary, I think it is our contribution to the negotiation between the North and the South. We hope that Washington and Richmond can peacefully resolve the issue of unification or division between the two sides under the support of Berlin in the negotiations, rather than appearing as a flamer. The Richmond government in the South of America welcomed Bismarck's statement. Alexander Stephens expressed his strong welcome. "We, the Confederate States of America, hope that other major powers besides Britain will join the confrontation between us and Washington in the North to ease the contradictions between the two sides. We, Richmond, are a government that maintains peace and stability in the country and the surrounding areas. We are currently in a semi-hostile state with a divided French Second Empire in Paris and the French Third Republic in France. We do not want to maintain such a relationship. We are willing to maintain a fraternal confederation with Washington, but the premise is that Washington should negotiate with us on an equal footing and hold meetings on an equal footing. We have had frank conversations with Crown Prince Frederick, who came with the opportunity for peace talks. In addition to Britain and Germany, I can tell you that we have also had many communications with the Kingdom of the Netherlands, which has influence in the Americas. Although our ally, the British Empire, is also worried about the influence of the Netherlands in Latin America, we do not object to the Netherlands participating in our peace talks between the South and the North. At present, all parties in the Kingdom of the Netherlands, whether it is the Christian Party, the Liberal Party, or the Socialist Party, have established stable relations with the two parties in our country. We have carried out friendly party diplomacy. We do not oppose the Dutch government to join the ranks of Britain and Germany and become the arbitrator in the negotiations between Richmond and Washington. Southern President Alexander Stephens made a public appeal, which was responded to by Melbourne. On April 22, 1881, the Foreign Minister of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Joseph Beit, stated in Melbourne, "The Netherlands supports talks between the divided North and South of the United States. We support President Stephen Douglas of the North and President Alexander Douglas of the South to hold face-to-face negotiations. We are willing to provide a fair venue, such as our Dutch Guinea in South America. In principle, we do not oppose frank negotiations between the two sides." Britain, Germany and the Netherlands entered North America one after another, and were involved in the practice of dividing the North and the South in the United States, which led other major powers to express their views. For example, Alexandrovich, who had ascended the throne to become the new Tsar, stated directly in St. Petersburg after becoming Alexander III that he would not undermine the friendly relations with Washington. Our position of supporting Washington has never changed. I will soon issue an order to have more close contact with Washington, and then with Washington's understanding, we will start exchanges with the South. Others such as the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Second French Empire have joined in the statement of trying every means to increase their international presence, trying to show their diplomatic capabilities as major powers. On April 24, 1881, Crown Prince Frederick of Germany arrived in Washington after leaving Richmond. Secretary of State Thomas, on behalf of Stephen Douglas, personally greeted the other party at the Dock, and President Stephen held a grand welcome ceremony at the White House the next day. During this visit to Washington, the capital of the United States of America, Crown Prince Frederick was met by Stephen Douglas, the President of the United States of America. As soon as the two met, Crown Prince Frederick talked about Germany's attitude in Latin America. Crown Prince Frederick said, "When Americans cannot even solve the problem of unification between the North and the South in the United States, how can they say convincingly to the problems in the entire America, if you encounter foreign intervention and do something wrong, we, the United States Congress, will step in. If you really want to escalate tensions, you will do this." The last two sentences are actually what the Netherlands and Britain are doing in America all the time. The weak United States of America hopes that America and Latin America will be peaceful and stable, and the situation will not escalate. This is in line with what our German Empire is doing in Latin America, emphasizing not to add fuel to the political struggle between Britain and the Netherlands. Stephen Douglas stared at the other party for a few seconds and said, "We don't object to Berlin's accusation against Britain. In fact, we have always suspected that Britain and the Netherlands are fanning the flames, just like the German Empire, which makes them suspicious." Stephen Douglas's statement made Crown Prince Frederick very happy, so the two of them started a frank exchange. They also exchanged their opinions and views on the Richmond regime in the South. Netherlands, Melbourne. William IV recently attended the Privy Council meeting, and he saw a series of things about the friendly relations between the United States and Germany, which made him frown. Germany, Britain and the Netherlands have joined in intervening in the internal affairs of the United States. In fact, William IV knew that Washington would not be satisfied, but under the pressure of the powerful existence of various countries, Washington could only swallow this bitter fruit. You must know that since the Monroe Doctrine was issued by President Monroe in 1818, Washington did not want European powers to compete for influence in Latin America, not to mention that now the influence is directly exerted on the United States itself. But in the past, the internal struggles among European countries could be checked and balanced. Now the problem is that European countries are almost fighting but not breaking, making it impossible for Washington to resist. In the end, he could only accept it. At this time, President Stephen Douglas must be very unhappy. Chapter 1, a total of 5 chapters. Chapter 899 William IV's Anglo-Saxons. However, since Napoleon I lost the Napoleonic Wars in 1815, Britain has fought several wars with the United States and all ended in failure. The smart British people know that using internal disintegration to deal with the former colony of the United States is a great progress. Germany, the emerging rising power, obviously also wants to get a piece of the pie, so it took the opportunity to stir up trouble and fish in troubled waters. The Russian Empire was in chaos and could not take care of itself. The powerful Austro-Hungarian countries surrounded it and it was difficult to exert its power. Spain was obviously weak again. It had ambitions, but it was unable to do so. The French Empire was divided for 10 years due to the internal existence supported by Germany and Britain. The Second French Empire established by Napoleon III should have become history after the German Empire occupied Paris in 1871, and then the Third French Republic came to power, but because of the powerful rise of the Netherlands, it allied with the German Empire at that time. In order to maintain balance, Britain finally supported Napoleon III to maintain his rule in northern France. Therefore, Napoleon III, who had not experienced complete failure and was depressed, miraculously did not die in 1873 and is still alive. He was born in 1808 and is 73 years old this year. However, due to the support of the German Empire, the French Third Republic has been established, and it has occupied the south bordering Germany and established a lion government. It can be said that France, which was originally one of the most powerful countries in Europe, can only become two first-class powers. For example, the Second French Empire ruled by Napoleon III is currently about the same as Spain in terms of strength. It has become a minor supporting role in Europe. As for the tier government of the French Third Republic in the south, its strength is not even as good as Italy, and it can only be compared with Portugal. Therefore, William IV currently only regards Britain and Germany as opponents, followed by Tsarist Russia and Austria-Hungary, and then the Second French Empire in Paris and the United States. At present, the Netherlands is developing very well. However, whether it is Queen Victoria or Bismarck William I, they are all old foxes in the political arena. They are not simple and need to be careful. Since the Vienna Conference during the Napoleonic Wars constructed the pattern, the United States has been deeply influenced by the Monroe Doctrine, tailored by President Monroe in 1818. The core of the Monroe Doctrine is independence and autonomy, and finally, after enough energy is reserved, it will exert influence in Latin America and establish the sphere of influence of the United States. As a later person, William IV naturally knows the careful calculation of the United States. These politicians in the United States have always been selfish people. Of course, the Netherlands is also the same, but the United States approach is more brutal. Although the United States and the Netherlands have become closer in recent years because the Dutch are one of the highest level officials in the United States, especially after the assassination of President Lincoln in 1866, the Dutch Andrew Johnson came to power, and the Dutch suddenly reached the peak in the political arena. Coming to power was an opportunity for the Netherlands to form an alliance with the United States, and they also cooperated in many international affairs. However, with the rise of Germans in the United States and the accelerated challenge of other ethnic groups to the Dutch rule, the Dutch began to face increasing pressure. Therefore, Stephen Douglas, the Dutch-American president, began to move from the original leader of the Democratic Party to the middle for votes, frequently contacting the German government and trying to occupy the votes of 8 million Germans among the 32 million people of the United States. Therefore, it is reasonable that the relationship with the Netherlands has become stiff, and more people in the American political arena do not think that following the Netherlands is in their best interests. Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, often publicly said during his two terms from 1801 to 1809 that in order to safeguard the interests of the United States could abandon France, the first ally against Britain, the second ally, the Netherlands, and even the third ally, Spain. Before that, in 1803, the United States purchased 2.14 million square kilometers of Louisiana from Napoleon I for $50 million, which allowed the United States to establish a large rear area. However, when the anti-French alliance was established in Europe from 1806 to 1807, the American president decisively abandoned the alliance friendship and even became a neutral party. When France finally failed, the American government, whose capital was New York at the time, did not even look at it. Because of this, the relationship between the United States and the Netherlands, in fact, William IV has always been like Britain, and cannot trust those upstarts. Unlike the Netherlands supporting Denmark or backing up the Kingdom of Siam, the United States, currently a semi-ally of the Netherlands, has always stood on the neutral side in the struggle between the Netherlands and Britain, and sometimes even dragged the Netherlands behind. It is also ridiculous to declare to the outside world and to the inside that it is extremely important to maintain the influence of the United States. Last time, after the Netherlands supported the overthrow of the previous government in Chile, Britain was driven away, but the United States was dissatisfied with the Netherlands' actions, so it began to alienate the Netherlands. Later, when the Netherlands sought influence on the four countries of the Central American Federation, the United States was also publicly dissatisfied. Then, Mexico formed an alliance with the Netherlands, and even with the support of the Netherlands, it became an observer country of the South American Six Nation Alliance. President Stephen Douglas jumped up and issued a condemnation statement. After that, the relationship with the German Empire became closer, and it almost caused the Dutch to collectively invade the United States. In the end, if it were not for the area and the opposition of many people in the Republican and Democratic parties, it would have subsided. Otherwise, it would be unknown what would happen in the end. In summary, William IV had already concluded that the American market could be used and occupied, but politically, the population was large, the ethnic groups were diverse, and the loyalty of the Allies was not enough and could not be trusted. This is the positioning of William IV. You must know that since independence from Britain, the United States has always been anti-American until now, but in the mid-20th century, it called itself Anglo-Saxon. At that time, Britain and the United States became the most solid alliance system. You should know that in the 21st century, Britain, the United States, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia have become the world of the Anglo-Saxons. If calculated by territorial area, even the countries directly ruled by the Anglo-Saxons in these 5 countries occupy 27.8 million square kilometers of the 1.49 square kilometers of the Earth's territory, accounting for 18.65%, which can be said to be uniquely endowed. William IV even guessed that Queen Victoria, who is still alive, would never have thought that the United Kingdom under her rule would launch a global occupation of colonies more than 100 years later. Although the population is not dominant now, it will be connected more than 100 years later, and the global dominance will reach such a solid level. Chapter 2, a total of 5 chapters today. Chapter 900, French aristocratic culture envied by William IV. At present, there are about 20 million pure Dutch people in the Kingdom of the Netherlands. The number in the UK is 36 million. If the Netherlands does not participate in the war, or does not participate in the war of human wave tactics, or if the war is carried out on the territory of other countries, then the loss of population will be minimized, which will be the biggest victory for William IV. Just look at Germany, Russia, France, etc. After several world wars, Germany has a population of 48 million, and France has more than Britain, reaching 38 million. However, the British mainland is not called a battlefield, and the population continues to immigrate to Canada, New Zealand, Canada, and even the United States. Finally, although the British mainland is only more than 50 million in the 21st century, the French population is only more than 50 million, and Germany is only about 60 million. Russia is now nearly 70 million, but even if the Soviet Union did not split, the population was less than 200 million before the dissolution of the 1990s. Therefore, the British approach is the teacher of the Netherlands. This is the main reason why William IV insisted on moving the capital to Australia to avoid the upcoming wars of World War I and World War II. Back to the topic just now, William IV was actually very wary of the United States, especially since the country seemed to be weak at present. That is, it did not have its own core population, and did not belong to the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Russia, the Netherlands and other countries with their own ethnic population. The population was complicated, so many people in this country were just second and third generation European immigrants, and now it was the European powers that dominated the world. So if we were to say which country had the most spies sent to destinations in the world at the end of the 19th century, that country would definitely be the United States of America, because the United States is currently the 4th largest economy in the world, second only to the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, and Germany. If the 13 southern states were not still in the process of division, with them, the United States could even surpass Germany and become the second only to Britain, just like in history. However, the appearance of William IV himself in this life, while leading the rise of the Netherlands, also split the future rival of the United States, which reduced its potential a lot and lost 1/3 of its population, so it is currently lagging behind Germany and can only rank 4th. Even in the previous 10 years, nearly half of the immigrant population in Europe was taken away from the Netherlands. Currently, among the white people in the Netherlands, European immigrants account for 6 million people, bringing the Dutch white population to 26 million. With the growth of population, the Netherlands will follow the old path of the Anglo-Saxons in the past. Many people think that the Netherlands is small in area and small in population, but what they didn't know before is that there are actually many Dutch people in the world. Even in 1957, when I traveled through this world, the local population of the Netherlands was equal to the population living overseas. It can be said that this is also the reason why William IV discovered in his early years and tried his best to bring these overseas Dutch people back to the mainland. When Britain was in the South African War, the Netherlands tried to attract France and Prussia to intervene. In fact, the purpose was to target the deserted Australian continent, but more of them had ideas about the Dutch Boers. In the end, William IV got his wish, and nearly 500,000 Dutch people finally returned to the Netherlands, becoming the largest move of the Netherlands to bring in the world's Dutch people. After that, the 1.5 million Dutch people living in America became the next target. So from 1866 to now, the number of Dutch people who immigrated from America to the Australian continent and other Dutch territories has exceeded 500,000. In addition, these people are young and have strong reproduction. It can be said that they have more than 1 million people plus children, which is more than 5 times. The population contributed by them alone has reached 5 million. Don't think he is not good at math. You can imagine that those who can travel long distances are young people, and there were few protective measures in that era. It is normal to have 2 children in 3 years. Moreover, William IV had a plan in advance. There are subsidies for families with increasing population. Therefore, the population of the Netherlands has doubled from the 5 million native Dutch population at that time in December 1861, 20 years after he came to power in the Netherlands, to 5 times. The Netherlands is currently the world's #1 in high technology, surpassing the United Kingdom. Population is productivity. Therefore, if the Netherlands wants to maintain its status as a great power, its productivity must keep up. In addition, the Netherlands currently has a territory of more than 14 million square kilometers, accounting for nearly 10% of the world's territory. According to William IV's expectation, the population must reach 300 million to maintain its dominance over the occupied territory. At the same time, controlling the birth or reproduction of people of color can ensure the dominance of the Dutch. Alice, there is a long way to go. Thinking of this, I think of the United States foreign policy again. As early as 80 years from Jefferson in 1801 to now, the United States sought and boldly proposed the strategic autonomy of the United States, and then developed it into the strategic autonomy of the Americas. These are all wishful thinking of the United States. The small countries in South America are not fools. They will not be unaware of the ambitions of the United States. They just want all countries to become the younger brothers of the United States. It doesn't matter who you follow, it just depends on who has more tips and who has less. The Netherlands has a small population, so South America is not very vigilant against the Netherlands. After all, the Netherlands itself does not have enough population, so how can it have the energy to rule the territories of so many small countries in South America? This is the folk idea of the South American allies that William IV learned about. After knowing this, William IV smiled slightly in his heart. He just wanted these effects in South America to maintain such ridiculous ideas. If there is no vigilance against the Netherlands, it will not be infiltrated by the Netherlands unknowingly. At present, the most infiltrated are Guadalcanal and Chile. Almost all the ruling classes of the two countries have been marked with a Dutch mark. This is just the beginning. The Netherlands has a full-scale plan, which means that the Netherlands has now become the largest destination for international students in these allies and even partner countries. At present, the Netherlands trains more than 20,000 international students for Latin America every year. You must know that this policy was implemented 20 years ago, but the scale is not so large. After all, the Netherlands is small, but with a relocation of the capital from Amsterdam to Melbourne on the Australian continent in 1871, these are no longer restrictions. Therefore, there are currently more than 100,000 South American students studying in the Netherlands, including college students and high school students. After returning to their home countries, these people will become one of the representatives of the Netherlands. They are proud to study in the Netherlands and will fully protect their identity and be firmly tied to the Netherlands. This is the Netherlands' biggest intangible asset in various countries, and the tangible asset is the Netherlands' current capital in these Latin American countries, eroding the foundations of these countries. In addition, the support of the South American Six Nations Alliance promoted by William IV has enabled comprehensive penetration in military, political, economic, and cultural fields. You can think about why French aristocratic culture is still prevalent in Africa and even the world until the 21st century. You must know that many African countries were colonized by France and should hate France, but they still can't resist it. Chapter 3, a total of 5 chapters today. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.